It's been a wee while. Might be a bit rusty tonight. No. New year, 2025, doing what we've done for the last couple of years now, and that is get a handle on where we are and have a look at the year ahead. Where we're at, what can be expected, and try and have a bit of fun trying to work out what's gonna happen to whiskey in the next 12 months. I'm looking forward to welcome you all back again, and I'll see you in a second. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the vPub. Welcome back to Thursday nights. And of course, Happy New Year to you all. I know we're already 9 days into 2025, but it's the first time that we've had a hangout together. So, yes, I wish all the very best for the year ahead for you. But what's ahead for whiskey? Well, nobody really knows. There's been a couple of years, I think, over the last decade or so, let's say, there's been a couple of marked years where I think that we've seen significant changes in whiskey. But generally speaking, over the last few decades, it's been this kind of gradual, quite nice, organic growth, real interest in flavor, real interest in premium, let's say, from a quality perspective, a real interest in single malts mostly, but the idea that whiskey can be something that you can sit and enjoy, something that you can enjoy learning about, something that you can share, something that you can enjoy participating as part of a community or a club or something that's more than just you sipping on your own. I think that over unprecedented recent decades of growth, we've been able to enjoy whiskey's variety, whiskey's community growing at its side, all of these things. But then in 2020, we saw what was really quite a significant step change. And it wasn't just whiskey that was affected by the start of the lockdown years, right? It was everything in our lives, I suppose. But whiskey was very much affected by that. And when people are sitting at home and they've got a bit more disposable income and things like that, and they've already got an interest in whiskey, or they've got a curiosity, or somebody has sparked their curiosity in whiskey, it's very easy for that to ignite and take off. And we saw that happen over the course of 2020, 2021, and even into 2022. By the time the end of 2023 came around, things had cooled off a hell of a lot. 2023, the winter into the start of 2024, was a real kind of step change once more. And that's when almost the volumes, it almost felt like the interest in whiskey, everything had started to cool off quite a bit. And that makes a lot of sense because people had just spent now on 3 years over accumulating. And of course, when I speak in the vPub, I'm speaking purely about the perspective of us as enthusiasts, me as an enthusiast, the way that we consume whiskey. We still represent a very, very narrow sliver of the wider whiskey consumer. Most people out there are just very kind of casually enjoying their whiskey, and that's absolutely fine. But the views that I share in here, and I suspect the views that I'm going to be sharing from you guys tonight, so much of it is going to be your views tonight. I asked for your views, and you sent me a hell of a lot of those views. Thank you all very, very much. Is very much focused on our perspectives as enthusiasts, whiskey geeks, whiskey botherers, however you want to self-refer. I do think that we have a sometimes obsessive interest in the whole thing. But I don't think that that's a problem. I don't think it's an obsessive interest in alcohol as such. I think it's an obsessive interest in the thing, in whiskey, and the flavour of it, and the variety of it, and the people that come to its side, whether they're involved in making it, creating it, selling it, whether they're involved in simply standing alongside us and enjoying it. We've seen those significant changes, and I think it's easy to react to those changes, those step change years of 2020, and let's say the start of 2024, a year ago, although it was a wee bit longer than that, where we see what's happening and we react. I think in 2020, we reacted in a way that we could see that there was a demand being placed on whiskey. So instead of us kind of relaxing with the whiskey that we already had on hand, we probably succumbed to that rush, that charge to compete with the people that were coming in to buy up the whiskey, whether they were buying it to hoard it, whether they were buying it because they were excited about it and they were new into the hobby, or whether they were buying it to flip it and make some money out of it. We witnessed that and we participated in the scrum for the whiskies. But we also witnessed the change that happened when people come away from whiskey, when the secondary market cooled off. People are predicting that the secondary market is going to continue to cool off. And I think that that's no doubt going to happen. But it's already been cooling off for at least a year and a half now, maybe a wee bit more. It's probably as cool right now as it's ever been. And that's great news for us as whiskey botherers and geeks, isn't it? Because we can suddenly access whiskies, for the most part, interesting whiskies at fairer, much fairer prices. However, I think now in this year, at the start of 2025, we're at that problem that's been predicted for a long time. I've been saying it for a long time, certainly. When we get to the point that the primary market is competing with the secondary market, we've got a problem. Whiskey is now at the point of being oversold in a lot of places, and it's been like that for a wee while now. However, things are changing again. I predict that we are now back into the pattern of the change going to be a slow change in whiskey, whether it's up or down. We're back into the kind of more kind of gradual changes in whiskey. I think these step change years have finished. It was the start and the close off of the COVID years, if you like. So nothing really happens too quickly in whiskey, I think. I think that 1 year is maybe often too narrow a snapshot to really take any kind of real... It's fun to do. It's fun to make predictions. It's fun to look at what's happened over the previous year. But it's not until you see 2 or 3 years together that you see any kind of real serious trends. It must be very, very difficult for anybody that's in the business. Anyway, what I'm going to do tonight, I've tried to kind of talk about us as a community, where we're at, where we're going, where we think whiskey's going, and I've broken it up into 5 different sections. I put out a poll for everyone to participate in those sections so that you could give me answers and give me some feedback. And where I was expecting a lot of something, I'm pleasantly surprised that you brought a lot of something else. And we'll get to that as we go through these 5 sections tonight. I'll share with you what those 5 categories, those 5 wee sections are in a second. I think what I need to do now, though, before I do anything else, is do what we always do at the start of the vPub and jump in while everyone's pulling up their bar stool, pouring their dram and getting comfy for another Thursday night session. I hope you're all doing very well. It's wonderful to have you here. Welcome, everyone, all of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. Cheers, everyone. Happy New Year. Just before I do this, one of my pals is going through a wee bit of a difficult time right now. Him and I have shared a recent difficulty in recent months. Recent months for me, much more recently for him. So I want to raise this wee glass to my friend Chris Banks and his wife June. But Chris, I know that you've gone through a loss recently, my friend, and you're feeling it. I want you to know that you're in our thoughts. You're in my thoughts. Condolences, my friend. All the best to you, June, and the rest of your family, Chris. Cheers. All right, my friend David Hong is in. He's bought me a dram already. He's saying, Happy New Year, my friend. All the best in 2025. Thank you very much, David. That's super generous of you to kick off the new year, buddy. I hope you're keeping well, and I hope you're far away from the disastrous scenes that we're seeing from LA right now, David. Jesse Artanzalo celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 37 months. He's saying, good evening, Aquavite and the Barflies. Jesse, good evening, right back at you. I hope you're keeping well, my friend, and thank you for your support. People that join the Barflies keep the vPub and all the content on the Aquavite channel completely ad-free. Okay, let's scroll up a wee bit. I'm looking for the orange, so if you're trying to get my attention, just type Aquavite, and I should be able to pick up as many of your comments as I can. Jean Colley saying, good evening, Aquavite and all. I've missed your company. Looking forward to exploring the 2025 Whiskey Crystal Ball. That's the trouble, isn't it, Jean? It is a bit of a kind of bizarre crystal ball. So when we talk about the predictions, what we're actually doing is just sitting talking about whiskey and having fun. There's no real authority here, I think. I don't think anybody's tuning in to see what's actually going to happen to whiskey in the months ahead. Clutch is saying Happy New Year, Aquaviti. One thing I know for sure is that 2025 should be an interesting one. Fantastic, Clutch. I think that every year has been an interesting one. I think this one is going to be interesting because it may hopefully start to come back and swing back a wee bit more in our favour. Stefan Novak, my pal Stefan, is in. Good to see you, buddy. I hope you're keeping well. And Harrow Whiskey Weekend Ram is saying good evening, Aquaviti and Barflies. Donner Pass Whiskey is in. Good to see you, Tim. Even if a whiskey lock or sales downturn situation happens, he's saying, I don't think the corporations will lower the price much, Aquaviti. It's interesting to see because we've already seen significant things happening. We've seen the move from Signatory Vintage, for example, for the 100 proof series to put out a selection of distilleries, a selection of casks at 100 proof, 57.1% ABV and very, very fair prices. Sub £50 prices, £45 of that order. We've seen Diageo participating in huge deep cuts that must be supported by them for Black Friday deals and things to try and drive up, just on select bottles, to be fair. But even right up until today, I read on the Dramface News section that Impex, one of the importers into the US, are already heavily discounting or offering discounts ahead in 2025. An average price reduction right across the board of the brands that they represent of 13%. I wonder where that's coming from. Is that off their back? Or are they pushing back on the producers? Jerry Miller is saying, good evening, Roy. Looking forward to a year of great vPubs. Well, as long as I can bring them to you, Jerry, I'll do my very, very best, my friend. Gino Kimo is saying, hello, Roy. Nice to see you and a big Happy New Year to you and your family and my friend. Cheers. Right back at you, Gino. Happy New Year to you and all of yours. Fantastic to have you in. Peter is saying, evening, barman. Interesting vPub and year ahead. Good to be here as usual, my big pal in the Netherlands. Good to have you in, Frank, as always. It's always a pleasure to welcome you here. It's one of the channel elders, Frank, I would say. Is it even a real vPub if he's not here? A bit like Jimmy Legg, a bit like a few others. Ginger Genius is here. Good to see you, Johnny. Saying Happy New Year. Bring on 2025. Here's to that. Bring it on, whatever it has in store for us, right, John? Blair Stevenson saying, evening all, evening Aquaviti. Well, you're in, Blair. Let me raise a wee glass to you and your recent news. A new addition to the Stevenson clan, and it's nice to welcome her. I hope her and her mum are all doing very, very well. Cheers to you, buddy. Congratulations to the family. Fantastic news. Best kind of news, isn't it? Whiskey and Wine Trails Tom is saying Happy New Year, Roy. Interesting times ahead, no doubt. What's most interesting is the amount of comments coming in from you. You know, some really quite interesting wee takes on things. Sandro Fazzolari saying Happy New Year. A tutti, he's saying Buon anno and Buon Ardnamurchen AD23 cast strength. Slancha, Sandro, welcome in, my friend. Good to have you here. So Buon anno must be a Happy New Year, of course, isn't it? Nice to have you, Sandro. A dram's come in from Alan Smith, but my wee dram to say, can we wish Stevie O a happy belated 70th? I did that ever so briefly the other day when I was chatting to Stevie, but I raise a wee glass. It's not often you hit the big 70. I hope you're in tonight, Stevie. Many happy returns. Sorry we missed your birthday. Cheers, bud. And Christoph is saying Happy New Year. And he's bought my wee dram as well to market. Thank you very much, Christoph. It's nice to have you as a barfly, and it's nice to have a wee dram in from you as well. And Alan Smith, cheers. Cesare the Flying Mooch is in. Good to see you, Cesare. He's saying I'm in my glasses a Coquerin heavily peated batch 10, a Signatory Vintage, 100 proof Linkwood, and my 5-barrel peated malt with one filling after a Roni. Wow. Great taste. I'm glad that I've been with you for over 2 years. He's celebrating being a member of the Barfly for 20 months, Cesare. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here, buddy. I hope the drams are going down well. And Kyle Taylor is celebrating being a member for 9 months, saying amazing news from Impex there. Great products. And Kyle, a wee thank you to you to recently step up to support me as a patron. There's 1 or 2 new patrons that's come in very recently over the Christmas break and things like that I'm going to reach out to and get a chance to get to know a wee bit better in the coming weeks, Kyle. And you're one of them, my friend. It's lovely to have you here supporting us a barfly too. And Jimmy Legg is here. He's bought me a dram to say we make too much of prices. If I'm sure I'll pay for quality, I just don't think any whiskey is worth more than $200. I wonder if you're speaking Canadian dollars here, Jimmy. That keeps me clear of any foolish spending. I think you probably are, which is roughly £100, €100. And I think a lot of people have put that barrier in there to keep them happy and content. I mean, think about it. £100, 200 Canadian dollars, $100. There's already a lot of money for a bottle of booze. It's not until we understand the pleasure that's derived for that money that we realise that there can actually be value found in that. But it's crazy to a lot of people that's just coming into whiskey or is not yet into whiskey yet. And it's something I want to speak about because it's critical to the predictions tonight. Dave Barnes is celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 31 months. Thank you, Dave, and Hellswood has seen happy birthday, Jerry Miller, for Sunday. Slantia. Oh, so we've managed to catch a birthday ahead of it happening. Jerry Miller. Many happy returns for Sunday, my friend. I hope it's your 30th all over again, Jerry. Cheers. Greg in Paris is saying, hi, Roy, and every barfly. Aquavita, I haven't seen your description or poll until tonight. Quite busy, curious about it, and wish you and everyone a great 2025 year. Don't worry about it, Greg. What I noticed about the poll is, firstly, I only put it out yesterday, so I got a very small window, a very small sample. You know, it was one of these topics that I was trying to hack through myself, and then I said, why am I doing this? Why am I just doing my own opinion here? Why don't I just reach out and do it by poll and get some insight and numbers so that we can share it with everyone, so that we can take a snapshot of where we are at as a community, this online digital community, certainly the people that hang around this channel. I put it out in the Barflies group. I put it out there as a public poll. Put it out to patrons first. But what I noticed that once it's settled to about 50 or 60, 70 votes, the ratios didn't change much. They stayed really quite solid right up until we got over 200, 223. I think we got in over the 24 hours that it was up for live. In future, if I do things like this, I will try to give it more time than that because I think it's nice to get a bigger sample size for those kind of projects. But when you're asking for people to give, put in free text feedback, you tend to generate a lot of data and a lot of opinion. And I'm often left wondering what to do with all of this. I think what I might do is, but what I'd have to do is go through and anonymize everything, all the quotes, but I could do that and then put it out in a public space somewhere maybe, so that everybody could read all the feedback from the community at large. It might be quite beneficial. But you didn't miss anything, Greg. But I'm sure that you would have participated. So perhaps the poll was already closed by the time you found it. Dave Swift is here, Sanagua Vitae. Lovely to make. David just jumped as I was reading your comment out there. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try and find you. I won't find you. You're too far up and I'm too far behind. Dave, please stay here, my friend. And I hope to catch your comment. What happens is that sometimes you'll click from one window to the other. And if the one window that you click on is frozen and you click on it, it'll suddenly just refresh and go right to the bottom, right to the latest comments. And you know how it works. Sorry, Stevie O is here. I am here, but embarrassed. Is that because somebody clicked and gave away what age you actually are? Sugar Kitty's celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 20 months. And Hellswood has bought me a wee dram along with that happy birthday wish to Jerry. I forgot to mention that, Helen. Cheers to you. Thank you very, very much. Sugar Kitty gifted 50 Aquavitae memberships. My goodness, it's super, super generous of you, my friend. So that's just anybody that gets an Aquavitae membership for a month or whatever, you get access to we channel emoji, loyalty badges and things like that. But what you're actually doing to keep that membership alive is keeping all the vPub content absolutely ad-free. I never go to Google for any revenue. And Stevie always bought me a very generous dram saying, thanks for all the kind birthday wishes, guys. It was a big one, but I'm hanging in there. You are, Stevie. And it was nice to chat to you the other day, my friend. Thanks for all your support. Thanks for stepping up. And thank you for buying me such a generous dram on your birthday. Stevie O, cheers. And my pal Stevie from the States and celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 57 months. Terrific stuff. Just fantastic to have you all here. I love being back here on a Thursday night again. I love the vPub. I love being behind the bar at the vPub. I even don't care the fact that I've left the heating on in this room and I can feel the temperature rising as I sit here. It's very, very, very cold outside tonight. The last couple of days in Glasgow, it's been bitterly cold, below freezing. I know that there are a lot of you out there are much more colder than that, but it's been a wee bit chilly in Glasgow recently. Anyway, here's how we're going to break it down tonight. I'll just share with you what the 5 categories are, and we can break it down in tonight. I'll put chapter markers underneath, so if you're picking this up on the replay, you can skip through an expressway. But the first one I'm going to look at is time. What am I talking about with time? When I'm talking about time, I'm talking about us as a community. If we're going to measure where we are at, and if we're going to talk about our predictions for the future, where is that voice coming from? Where are those predictions coming from? Where's this opinion coming from? How long have we been into whiskey? How long have we been around whiskey? How new and green are we? How seasoned are we? Are there veterans in? That type of thing. And obviously you've responded in your poll to tell us exactly where you're at. The second part we're going to talk about is the knowledge. You know, we can talk about time and how long we've been into whiskey, but we could have been drinking whiskey for 40 years and never once have picked up a book or read a label or tried to understand a wee bit more what's behind a name or a brand or anything. And I think that's typical of the majority of whiskey drinkers, honestly. So you can measure time, but you can also measure knowledge. Some people are just in and already deep diving because they are absolutely fascinated by whiskey. It hooks them in a way that is not typical, and that tends to be what produces a whiskey geek, a whiskey enthusiast, a whiskey botherer like us. So I've measured that too. Then we'll go on to measure mood. And this is where we start to transition away from kind of the community and focusing on that community, but transitioning towards how that community views 2025 and the year ahead. What is our mood like? How do we feel about purchasing whiskies into 2025? And the reason that I think this is critical is that at the end of 2023, right up until the end of 2024, and almost everything I'm going to share with you tonight is going to be anecdotal. But the fact I've gone out to get opinions from you makes it a wee bit less anecdotal and a bit more of a kind of temperature measurement. But the anecdotal feedback I was getting at the end of 2023 and throughout 2024 was, I'm not buying any more whiskey, Roy. That was the mood, and I want to measure it today. Is that still the same? Have we consumed some whiskey? Have we realised that whiskey's changed quite a wee bit and there's some tempting products out there? I want to measure the mood. Then I want to go on to talk about our perspective and where we think whiskey actually is. If we're going to make any predictions, where is whiskey today? Where does it need to be? Where does it need to go? How's it going to get there? And then, of course, since we are not in control of any of those decisions, where do we think it's actually going to go? Either through decisions and strategies from the producers and companies in whiskey themselves, or market conditions that are just going to force things. And then finally, we'll talk about the big thing, the elephant in the room, the thing that changes and motivates us more than anything once we're inside the whiskey bubble, and that is, of course, cost. What do we think will happen to prices in 2025? That's going to be the 5 categories that I work through tonight. Hopefully I'll remember to bring those banners up, and that'll help me put in the chapter markers. If you're picking this up on the replay, if I've forgotten to do that, you can scroll through and see when the banners change, hopefully. So that's how we're going to get through it. Whiskey Hog is in saying Happy New Year to you all. May the best of 2024 be the worst of 2025, and that applies to all your whiskey too. What a wonderful sentiment, Whiskey Hog. Great to have you in, and thank you for the kind wishes. That's a peach of a toast. I'll raise one for that. Please take care with the elephant in the room. Too much bottles can be broken. Yeah, unfortunately, you're right. Price can make or break a bottle, figuratively speaking, on the purchase of it. Jimmy Legg is having a go at me already, lol. How cold is it, Aquavita? Yes, I know, it wasn't actually that cold. It was -7 last night in Glasgow, I think. And I think when we woke up and got out and got into the car this morning, it was -5. Throughout the day, it went up above freezing for a wee bit, and I think it's dropped back down again. And it's to get mild again by Sunday. The ocean tends to we don't really get extreme temperatures. So when we do, we're not always prepared for it. Grain of Malt is in. Good to see you, buddy. That's James in Sweden. He's saying we love the vPub too. Aye, and I love having you here, James. It's fantastic. Fantastic to have you, buddy. Hope you're keeping well. Happy New Year, James. Aye, so let's get in with the first thing. And what I need to do actually is that I think the best thing I can do is bring in the wee presentation I made. I spent a bit of time It's a bit it's a bit clunky. It's a bit ugly, let's say, but it's going to let me help to share, visualize, and share with you the results of the poll. I love a Google form, as everyone knows. So all I did is I went out to the community, first into Patreon and then out to the Facebook Barflies. And I said to everyone, just answer based on these 5 categories, but also in a free text field at the end, just give me your opinion. So I think what we'll do throughout tonight is, while we're just breaking up the flow of things, is I'll go through. I've got 19 pages of feedback from you guys here. It's just fantastic to read. It really is good and it's insightful. So what I decided to do is what I'll do is I'll go through a page at a time and just grab one at random from each page so that I'm feeding back to everyone. But hopefully all of you guys, if I figure out a way to anonymize this and be able to share it with everyone. Chris Moore is saying, stock prices of Diageo, Louis Vuitton, Pernod, SMWS dropping quite significantly last year. It might be quite a big red flag for the market too. I think it's going to be a volatile year, says Chris Moore. Alan Smith says, not sure if a lot will change. I fear we may lose a few more smaller distilleries and independent bottlers. I really hope that's not the case, Alan. I wonder if the smaller companies are kind of almost a wee bit protected by their smaller scale. Blair Stevenson is in, the one you've just mentioned, Blair, earlier. He said there will be a few who push their pricing a little. However, I don't see that being a trend in the industry as a whole. I don't think sales will grow, nor will they dramatically drop. So a wee bit of kind of more of the same from Blair, a wee bit of pragmatism there. Derek McGrainer in Ireland is saying Diageo will sell off at least one of its distilleries. That's an interesting one, Derek. Since Diageo was formed in the late 1990s, so getting on for close to 30 years now. Diageo's been around, but obviously DCL was there beforehand and before the mergers and everything. But since Diageo, as we know, Diageo has been formed, and it's my understanding they've never sold a distillery, so that would be big news indeed. Stefan Novak is saying the good, the bad, and the ugly. Some of the newer and older integrity distilleries will keep on improving and bring even better products. The old guard will truck on as if nothing has happened and lose ground. The rift between casual whiskey and nerd whiskey will widen. Interesting, Stefan. He's saying, plus, some of the producers who failed to read the room might not survive 2025. It's interesting, and I'm reluctant to comment, but I have to comment because I think it's representative of the community feedback. This week we saw Isle of Tyree release their inaugural. Announce the release of their inaugural. Now, just to put it in perspective, Tyree is a brand new distillery. It's tiny. It's so small that it makes distilleries like Daffmill and Edredor look like juggernauts, right? I mean, Tyree is a tiny distillery, and it may be a particularly small outturn, and it may be a big deal that they're actually releasing whiskey from Tyree, of course, but they want £199 for their inaugural bottle. The reason I was reminded about that is Stefan talking about not reading the room correctly. I just think that it's just, I feel like Tyree should be making whiskey that is for people like me that's really into whiskey, as well as picking up casual drinkers and sippers, tourists and everything else. But I think that they are the type of distillery that hopefully is going to be picked up by whiskey lovers, whiskey fans, and be talked about loudly. But £199 a bottle, that's not going to happen. It's really, really strange. A rise in English whiskey, says Whiskey Sitrep. I suspect that's already happening, and it's happening much louder and faster than anyone might have expected, with over 40 distilleries now. I think 55 distilleries in England now, is that the number? And I tried one very recently that I thought was fantastic, Whittaker's English whiskey. I managed to sip over Christmas. There's a write-up in Dramface about it. It was the Dramface review that inspired me to pick up a bottle. When it arrived, I was not let down. I thought it was fantastic. What a surprise that Whittaker's English single malt was. One of the big companies will sell one of their distilleries for cash flow. My money is on Pernod Ricard, says Jonathan Flowers. Interesting that you say that, Jonathan. The last two predictions vPubs that I had in 2023 and start of 2024, That was one of my predictions just for fun, and I'm not going to do any of those fun predictions tonight. It was me suggesting that Pernod Ricard would sell another distillery. It might happen yet, Jonathan. You never know. Anyway, let's bring this in. Let's shape things up so that I can share it with all of you. Okay. The first category that I've already mentioned to you is us talking about time. And when I'm talking about time and how long I'm speaking about us, if we're going to share our opinion, I think it's important for anybody that's tuning in is to work out, how much time have we been around whiskey? And I asked the question to everyone in my wee poll. It was the first of the 5 questions, and I said, select the best option to best describe where you are in your whiskey journey at the beginning of 2025. Of course, this is from a time perspective, and the options I gave were box fresh, less than a year in, and I'm just in the door and I'm loving it. Or potentially I'm a newbie. I've been here a wee bit, but still shiny and keen. And then we gradually move forward. Committed. I've been around long enough to know what I like and I'm staying. Or I've been around long enough to know that I like it and I'm staying. Seasoned was the next option, second from last. Comfortable in my knowledge, but canny enough to know that there's still a lot to learn. And finally, somebody that was willing to admit that they were a veteran. Not much surprises me anymore, but I'm still here. So they've been around a long time. We can think of a few people in our community right now that would fit that. But they're still very much enjoying it despite being around it for a number of years. Now, we're measuring this from the perspective of time, yes. Of course, it's easy to conflate time and knowledge, and I do it regularly. I've done it here a wee bit, but I did try to separate it so that we could look at the two different things. I think this is super interesting to me, and while there will be a lot of positives tonight, I think this is a bit of a red flag for me, for us, for our community, and I need to think long and hard about how to address this. I can't overthink it because I've never asked these questions like this before. I've never measured it like this before. But let's see how it was split up. I want to summarize it so it's a wee bit more easy for you to visualize. So if I show you this kind of massive majority here, what we can see is this is the yellow, the green, and the purple, which is people that are committed, people that are seasoned, and people that consider themselves veterans. These are journeymen in whiskey. These are people that have been around long enough. This is exactly the type of people that stay till the quiz at the end, that perform well in the quiz at the end. These are the type of people that have been following whiskey for a while, that can tell tales of whiskey past, that knows about the state of whiskey over the years, all of these things. And that's wonderful. Why is that wonderful? Because when people step into our community, they can be like a sponge and pick up on all this experience over the years that people have been enjoying whiskey. The worry for me here is obviously the missing piece there. So the people that are box fresh or newbies make up a mere less than 7% of our community. Now, I have to caveat this, 223 responses, as you see there. But as I said, as soon as we hit that 50 to 60 responses, the ratios and the numbers stayed very static. There wasn't much change. And I put it to you that it would take us to go out into 1,000 or 2,000 or beyond in order to see those ratios fracture or split or change much in any direction. I think it's a small sample, but I think it's a decent sample size. And that tells me right there that our community needs new blood. Is it what we're doing? Is it the content of what I'm putting out there, what my peers are putting out there? Is it the content of WhiskyTube online whiskey communities? Is it the attitude and the setup at festivals and retailers, whiskey clubs? It's difficult for me to pinpoint exactly what that whole thing is. So when we talk about this time element, the amount of time that we've been into whiskey, it's nice that there's a lot of people that are experienced, that have seen multiple changes in whiskey over the years. But I think what we're missing is new people coming in to keep it fresh and keep it exciting. Now, I did not expect that. I'm normally commentating from an anecdotal perspective, and I have very clear images in my mind of the new people that have appeared in my community in the last few months, in the last year. The people that would have answered in the red and blue section there. I can see them. I've shaken their hands. I've got to know them. I've got to welcome them in here. That's good and it's encouraging, and I feel buoyant that there are new people coming in regularly. I put it to you, and maybe give us all a wee bit of a pause for thought. What can we do to make this more accessible and easier for people to step in and realize that it is positive, great fun, full of good people, life-changing even? I think it's interesting to consider. Now, maybe people would expect only 5 or 10% of people to come in new to a thing regularly. But I tend to try to look at things through the kind of Pareto's principle, you know, the 80-20 rule. I would expect that number up to be closer to, 15, 20% of new people. 7% seems very, very thin to me right now. Be interesting at the start of 2020 if I'd posed that same question, what the answers would have been. Fernando's saying, I think the independent bottlers will make official bottling prices start to settle down. And it could also be another good year for the blends, the good ones, the craft ones. Will also be a year where I will buy less. Interesting, Fernando. Hold that thought. Alberto, Road to Dram. Good to see Alberto. How's things over in Italy? Saying Aquavita, it takes a while for a newbie to become a barfly. It was almost 18 months for me, so possibly you have some biased data there. I don't doubt for a second. And if you were going to say that, if you were hoping to get 100% new people in, yeah, that you'd be absolutely right. But I just need it to be a wee bit higher, I think, than 7%. I think it seems to me to be quite low. And Jimmy Legg is saying Aquavite. Here's a familiar statement. I don't agree, he's saying. I think there's a very reasonable percentage of new people. It means we're growing at a rate that can be maintained. Absolutely, Jimmy, I agree with you. And it's something that I've always been very, very protective of. People get frustrated at me that I'm not particularly aspirational, that I'm not putting out the right content to grow the channel in a very, very quick way. But people over time settle with it and they realize what I'm actually trying to do is I'm not trying to grow a channel. I don't care about the YouTube algorithm or the YouTube metrics, subscriber count and things like that. I do care about interaction. I do care about building a community inside YouTube, but that's my priority, to build a community. That's what I've been after. That's the only thing I can do. I can't grow a channel on live streams, but I can grow a community on live streams. I think that organic growth is always what I've been chasing, but this isn't about me. This is about me. I think that maybe it's arrogant to think that you could take that question and the results from that question and use it as a snapshot to look at the whiskey community. But I wonder if the fact that the prices are as high as they've ever been, the accessible whiskies that are affordable, the quality is as low as it's ever been. And I think that the variety is such right now that the intimidation level, the fear factor of coming into whiskey, not knowing where to start right now, all of those are at a perfect storm point. I think that that's maybe something that they are acting as barriers to stop people coming in. Whiskey is already an expensive thing. So if you're looking for new people to come in, it's easy to conflate new people with younger people most of the time. That's probably not fair. Anybody can come into whiskey at any time. But generally speaking, you need to come into whiskey and you need to go over the initial barrier of, oh my goodness, £50 for a bottle of whiskey, really? And then realize that people are out there spending much, much more than that. I think all of these things, and I think we need to be a wee bit more thoughtful. I need to be a wee bit more thoughtful about my content, that when I speak, it's not alienating or isolating people that could potentially, with a wee bit of more of a guiding hand, come in. Per Caldenby, good to see you, Per, in Sweden, of course, the man behind the Schmogen whiskey. Fantastic to have you here. Aquaviti, true, the whiskey industry does need new blood, but newbies are probably unlikely to show up in the vPub or as a barfly, so results likely skewed. So he's agreeing with Jimmy Legg. Absolutely right. I do I do accept the thing, but I stand by the idea that the concept that if the whole community went out to, if everybody that's selling Schmogan whiskey, Springbank, independent bottlers, any of the new distilleries that's come along, anything that's naturally presented, anything that you want to call craft, even though that can sometimes be a clumsy word, all of these kind of premium or natural whiskies or whiskies that's made for flavor, and you were to just measure that community, that market that you were selling it to, and try and work out how many new people are coming in, I think that there are too many things in place right now acting as barriers. And I think that should be an area of focus. I think my prediction for the year ahead with that whole thing is we need to think about how we can make it exciting for new people to come in, much like it was exciting at the start of 2020 when the COVID kicked in. Whiskey was an exciting place to come in because everything that whiskey offered was not interrupted by, generally speaking, by COVID. Kyle Taylor is saying, I think the low newbies numbers are because you're polled Patreon, not the vPub. That would be a poll of the 400 of us in here. I think that there's a lot of truth in it. As I've said, I don't want to keep going over it again, but I do think that the community that I speak to tends to be the community that a lot of the producers that we're worried about surviving 2025 and beyond, because the big boys, they can deal with a downturn, right? They can't predict it, they can't forecast it. They're really terrible at that, but they can cope with it when it happens. Share prices go down, exports go down, production goes down, mothballed distilleries, reduced shift patterns at distilleries. All of these things happen, but they can weather it. I think a lot of us are concerned about is the independent bottlers, the smaller distilleries, the newer distilleries that's come along, the distilleries that have really looked after us from a craft and natural whiskey perspective, flavour first, that kind of thing. So it'd be interesting. I think that is kind of where I'm shining the torch there on the numbers. Gene Kelly saying, as your number of barflies and patrons increase, the number of newcomers indeed needed to significantly grow, the percentage will continue to become more elusive. Ooh. So if that is the case, Gene, I agree with you. The number is the number. I don't chase numbers. But I need to be aware that I'm only speaking to about 6 or 7% of newbies right now. And I would feel better if that was more. If I'm mindful and aware, I can modulate my language and make sure, I'm not going to take away the attention from the people who have come around the vPub and things, but I'm going to try and modulate my language so as not to be exclusive. And I think that's kind of what I'm talking about. When it comes to whiskey wider in general, I think my point here that I'm trying to make is that I think a lot of the problems I face with that is true in a lot of other places too, because of price, because of the sheer variation in range, because of so many other things in whiskey. I think there may be barriers there that's difficult for people to come in. Whisky Wings, good to see you, Whisky Wings, a part of the excellent Honest to Malt podcast. Aquavita, I love the recycling reviews for yourself. The experience of virtually sharing a dram with Ralphie and Scott and Bart, to have the learning experience in private was a big part of my journey. I don't doubt for a second, and I loved it too. The reason I'm here right now, Mike, is exactly that. Ian Bruce is saying, you need another lockdown. Seriously, though, some people take the time and the confidence to break into an established group. Maybe a vPub with content that may entice newbies may help. Yeah, perfect, Ian, absolutely. But we don't want to force it and then alienate the people who are seasoned and enjoying it and have been around for a long time. Whisky Wings is also celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 45 months. Jimmy Legg has bought me a dram to say, I plan to open some bottles this year that I've been not opening because I'm a weirdo. I'm looking forward to it. This is going to be a great year. I opened a bottle at New Year. I'm going to mention it. It's over my shoulder here. Can I reach it? Yeah, this was a gift to me for writing the foreword for the David Stark book, Pioneer and Spirits, the book that came out last year. And this was left at Good Spirits Company for me, and I picked it up from David. Look at it. It was one of his creative whiskey company products. It's a 1990 Glen Grant, 25 years old at the point of bottling, 2015, I guess it would have been bottled, sometimes maybe 2016, February 2016, one of 204 bottles. This was sealed for a long time. I thought this is going to be one of these ones that I just sit about waiting for one of those special moments that never come around. So I opened it at Bell's. A couple of friends here, a couple of whiskey pals here, Kevin and Craig. We opened it together. My pal Roberto from round the corner. All love whiskey. We opened this, and it was one of those kind of conversation stoppers for me. Didn't have a lot of whiskey at Christmas, but at New Year I was enjoying it. And that one was a cracker. It's nice to open bottles, Jimmy, and I hope you have fun doing it. Whiskey 2525 Aquavite. When is the next recycled review coming? Way overdue. It is way overdue, my friend. And it's not like I'm short of empty bottles, I have to be honest with you. Despite cleaning out the entire vPub and rearranging everything in here over the Christmas break, I've still got empty bottles sitting down there at my feet. I need to get on it, my friend. Nice to welcome you in. I think it's the first time I've welcomed you. Ben Damon Hunter saying, Roy is a whiskey evangelist and desires new people enjoying their new journey. Almost 6 years here. Ben, there's a lot of truth in that. One of the biggest excitement, I don't know, it is vicarious enjoyment. It absolutely is. But it's fantastic when I recognize what happened to me and other people. Whiskey's too good to keep to ourselves, right? Doodle the Dram Arnie is saying, one of our new guys in. When I visualize new people, I'm visualizing people like yourself, Arnie. And he's saying, well, I notice that there is a funny barrier due with the perception of tasting being hoity-toity. Given into pure geekiness, revealed the fun and built my confidence to take part. That's really interesting as well. You know, the idea of swirling the glass and talking about, is this pineapple or peach and all of this stuff. And I've tried really, really hard over the years to make that as fun as possible, but I realize sometimes when I'm interrogating or analysing a whiskey, and often I'll do it live as well, it can seem a wee bit exclusive, especially to people that are in and just tasting very broad things like spice or vanilla or sweet. But what we need to do is make it as comfortable as possible for everyone. Alistair Gray saying, opened that Springbank 12 cask strength on Christmas Eve. Wow, just wow. And this is a Springbank newbie, despite Alistair being around whiskey for a long time. I understand the hype now. Beautiful liquid. You know, not every bottle of Springbank is absolutely brilliant, but every single one is absolutely interesting and honest and integrity. Major Nut is saying, have to catch the rest on replay. Love the discussions though. So many people with good views on things. Major Nut, it's wonderful to have you in here, buddy. I hope you pick it up on the replay, my friend. If you are here on the replay, welcome back, Major Nut. Danny Hebbington is saying, can't wait to see Jimmy Legg comment on Aquavita's next vPub. Wearing a hat backwards, shades and saying bro every 2 minutes. Been one of the newbies. Donner Pass Whiskey Tim's bought me a wee drama again to say I'm going to be opening more special bottles that I put away this year. After the loss of Andy, who was 1 year younger than me, I realised that they need opening. Here. When he's talking about Andy, he's talking about our friend Food Quig over in Canada. Cheers to that, Tim, and thank you for the dram. Cheers. Ben is saying, absolutely agree, Roy. I'm sharing with a newer person and enlightening their journey. Even though I've been drinking for probably over 30 years, there's always something new to explore, and it means that it's new for you too. And ever when Chris is here, Chris, a package turned up over Christmas and New Year. Fantastic package. You know what was in there. All those wee treats that the kids marvel at and things like that. Amazing, buddy. It took a long, long time to find us, to get here, but it came here over Christmas, buddy. Thank you very much for that. Everyone, you've been around since the beginning, buddy. Nice to have you in. Cheers. And Declan Boyle is saying, I've been watching for some time, maybe 12 or 18 months. Love these chats. Thank you, Declan. That means a lot. For me, it's just me standing up, rocking up here and monologuing. And I think that is often one of the barriers to people coming to and understanding the vPub. It's certainly not typical YouTube content. It's not even typical whiskey content. But it is that idea of kind of having, I don't know, a virtual pub that you can all hang out in and me's your barman rather than pouring drinks and pouring opinions, right? Or chat. Greg in Paris is saying, above all, share and enjoy. Once said in a certain gentleman near London some time ago, I love to see a smile on the face of people who try my whiskies as guests. I think we all get a wee bit of that. All right, let's move into the second wee questionnaire that I want to share with you in the section, because we talk about how long we've been into whiskey. But as I've said, you know, we've got Ben Demon Hunter there that's enjoying sharing his whiskies with somebody that's been into whiskey for 30 years. But he doesn't really, or he's been into alcohol, maybe he's just been drinking for 30 years, but he doesn't really know a lot of knowledge about whiskey. He doesn't understand maybe the difference between a malt and a grain and a blend, and he doesn't understand what Speyside means, and he doesn't understand the importance of not filtering it or not adding fake color and all of these things in order to keep it natural, about flavor, about taking your time, about slowing down. So I asked the community, I wanted to ask them, well, what's your take? You know, how much knowledge do you think you have? Why are you here in this community? And in terms of predicting the whiskey year ahead, that's based on what? Because if somebody's only just in for 6 months, it's going to be difficult for them to have any real kind of predictions for the future. They're basing it very much on a very narrow snapshot of time. It just makes sense. So I wanted to kind of measure how much knowledge is that out there in the community. Anybody that's hung around the vPub for long enough will know that, especially if you've stayed to the quiz at the end, just how much sheer knowledge there is in our community. It's quite marvelous to witness. With knowledge, of course, comes discernment. And I don't just mean discernment as in the ability to predict the future a wee bit better, but discernment in how to pick your next bottle, how to help other people pick the next bottle, and how to predict what that choice and selection is going to be in the year ahead, and how to predict maybe how much it's going to cost to attain that. So I wanted to measure that thing and ask people which of these options best described how you feel about the state of whiskey at the beginning of 2025. Yeah, I don't think that that's correct, is it? Have I made a wee mistake here? Let me have a look at this. I was asking people how they would self-refer. I may have made an error here. I'm going back to the original. I might just do a wee screen share on this. No, let's just go with it. I think there's just a bit of a disconnect with how I'm framing it. I think that that's hopefully what it is. Let's just go through and see how these answers play out. What I'm actually asking here is people's perception and discernment of what they're going to explore. I think that that's what I'm doing. There's a bit of a disconnect with the way I've asked the question. Let's play it out and see how it answers. You could have answered at the state of whiskey at the beginning of 2025. You feel that it's all a wee bit intimidating, suggesting that you're probably new in and low on knowledge. You could have answered it's very interesting to me, but I'm all ears. Somebody that's been able to power past that, like Arnie has. Somebody that's new in the door, but still keen to learn. Then the next one was I'm fairly selective, but quite open and flexible. The next one was I'm starting to refine what I know, and I know what I like. So as we go through the middle section here, we're starting to become much, much more discerning and selective. But then we have some people admitting that they remain voracious. I am voracious, and I buy more than I need, and I'm cool with it. Then there was somebody answering, I'm voracious, I buy more than I need, and I need to slow down. That's the blue one. I'm very selective, I stick to trusted brands. I'm very selective, and I stick to transparent producers. That's people who bring natural whiskey with transparency. And finally, the people who say, I'm no longer buying, but I still like to be here. So people that have got plenty of whiskey to be getting on with, they've built up a lot of knowledge over the years. They know what they've got into, they know what they're enjoying, but they've stopped buying. Now, anecdotally, between you and I would suggest that, as I mentioned to you already, the people that have been coming up to me and speaking loudly, the most vocal people, are vocal because they are taking a stand and saying, I'm buying no more. But look at these answers. They betray something completely different. All of these colours that you see here there's nobody suggested it's intimidating, which is really interesting, and it's probably to do with my community has already been pointed out. But they're either saying it's interesting and they're all ears. That's the red section here. They're saying I'm fairly flexible, I'm open and flexible, but I'm fairly selective. They're getting on a wee bit. And then the green was I'm starting to refine what I know I like. Then the purple was I'm voracious, and the blue is also voracious. Voracious for different reasons. Some of the people admitting they were voracious wanted to slow down, while others were saying, the purple section here saying I'm voracious, but I'm absolutely cool with it. So what we're saying is that whole entire section there, more than 3/4 were saying that not only are they collecting, know their way about the whiskey, already very knowledgeable, but they don't really intend to slow down. Here's the people that intend to slow down. I'm very selective. I stick to trusted brands. Is that pink section there? I'm very selective. I stick to transparent producers. Is the green section there? So a wee bit more promiscuous than the pink section. And then finally, only 2.2% said, I am no longer buying, but I still like to be around. Literally less than 1/4 of the community have amassed enough knowledge to back off the pedal. Now I'm conflating things. I see the mistake I've made here. It's not really a mistake, but I can see what I've done. I've conflated knowledge with experience. Experience not in terms of time, but experience around whiskey. That's how we build our knowledge. And the reason that we overaccumulate whiskey is because we're curious, because we want to learn more. But that was fascinating to me. Anecdotally, I'd have said to you that more than half of my community are not buying whiskey anymore. They're sitting on what they've got. And that completely betrays that. I went on to ask more than that. And the next question, I went on to ask them their mood and how they feel about buying whiskey in 2025. Will they buy less? Will they buy more? Okay, let's bring me back up on screen for now. How do you feel? I have been pragmatic from the beginning, but I think it's always because of what I do. I'm always going to overaccumulate whiskey. I'm going to have not just too much whiskey to fit on a shelf, or I'm going to have too much whiskey eventually to fit in a room. And the reason for that is because I need to be up to date on whiskey. I'm going to talk to you, and I need to speak to a point of maybe not all-knowing, but I need to speak from a point of being experienced with those whiskies. If I'm going to critique a whiskey, it's not just in isolation. I'm going to critique it based on the peers that it sits alongside on the shelf. I'm going to try and contextualize it. I'm going to try and judge it and how it fits into the wider whiskey offering. That means that I'm buying whiskey that some of it doesn't even make it onto the vPub or into reviews or whatever. I'm buying whiskey for other reasons and other purposes. I dramatically overaccumulate. It's different for you guys. You can afford to be a lot more selective. I'll just cast your mind back to last year when I did the top 10 best-selling whiskies. Very few of those feature in our collections. But how can we critique the stuff that we are buying unless we know about those things? Espen K. Anderson has bought me a dram. Espen, it's wonderful to have you in. You're a barfly, but I wonder if I hope I've welcomed you before. Espen is saying, Happy New Year, Roy. A while since I've had the opportunity to follow the vPub live now. So you have been around a wee while, but it's just been a while since you've joined us. Thank you very much, Espen, for your dram. I should let everyone know what's in my glass tonight. Got 5 glasses out in front of me, and I've got 5 random bottles that I picked because we're not focusing on the bottles tonight. This is a 10-year-old Speyburn. Look at the size of the bottle. It's actually a litre bottle. 10-year-old Speyburn featured in those vPubs I've just mentioned, the ones that I talked about last year about the best-selling malts and what should be the best-selling malts. Speyburn was part of that. It's often seen as a bottom shelf whiskey, but over the last few years they've built up quite a reputation with the 15 and 18-year-old fully natural, unchill filtered natural colour. Fantastic whiskies they were too. Fell in love with them. And it's been announced that they are now rebranding those whiskies and reducing them back down to 40%, which is the strength of the 10-year-old. This is not the typical 10-year-old. This is the travel exclusive 10-year-old, but it's very strange. 46% ABV, and look here, non-chill filtered. Weird. Why is the travel retail pointed at geeks? And the one that you can buy from specialists and on the supermarket shelves and everywhere else pointed at the mass market. Seems a wee bit odd. What's stranger to me is the fact that they've abandoned all of this and they seem to be going to watered down 40%. It's heartbreaking. And they were in the running for my wooden spoon of 2024 because of it. I tell you what's worse. This was a gift to me from a pal, Stefan K. And it cost him 20 euros. 20 euros for a litre of almost natural whiskey. Pretty confident this is coloured. 20 euros. Underselling whiskey is as destructive in my mind as overselling whiskey. That's too cheap. Who's making money out of that? It's just, the perception's wrong. It looks like it's suddenly this is not cheap whiskey. This is good whiskey. I'm loving sipping this whiskey. I'm loving the texture. I'm loving the mouthfeel. I'm loving the flavour. I'm loving everything about it. 20 euros is too cheap. Even if this was 70 CL, it would be too cheap. But a litre is far too cheap. I know I've featured in a vPub before, but that's what's in the glass tonight. And I think that's, I don't know how much favours that's doing for whiskey. I want one of those, says Donnerpass Whiskey. Yeah, at 46%. You summed up my status at the start. Over accumulated during COVID, over 100 open bottles, says Alistair Gray, that I need to be drunk. I don't need any more whiskey. I simply don't have the space in the house. I predict, Alistair, that it's more than that for you. And I think that a lot of people have started to settle with the idea that they realise that so much of the love of whiskey is not the accumulation and the collection selection. It is the love of exploring new experiences. I put it to you, I challenge you, Alistair Gray, in 2025, what you need to do is find people to share it with. Clear the space that way. I started buying a lot more independent bottles, says Lucas. Lucas, I don't doubt for the majority of people that are on that kind of knowledge experience type curve that they inevitably drift to more independent bottlings because they find so much more interest, grip, flavour, quality, variety, all of it through the independent bottlers, where official bottles focus on obviously business strategies, of course, price and all of that, but they often look for efficiency and consistency and things when we're actually speaking about malt whiskey, which is a batch made product by design, doesn't like to play efficiently, and it doesn't like to play the consistency game either. Alistair is saying, I need to move to Glasgow. That's where I need to do. I'm too far north. There are still people around you up there in the northeast, buddy. Gav O'Connor is here saying, whilst I do have the collection that some here have, I have enough that I've set up a one-in, one-out system. It's a good way to work it, Gav. It really is a good way. A lot of people operate that either because of a bottle count or the real estate of their shelf or whatever it may be, cabinet. But it's a good one to do. And Hellswid is here. Good to see you, Helen. How's you and Andy? Happy New Year to both. We've not bought any whiskey this year. She's having a wee laugh because we're only a week in. There's a lot of year left to do. All right, before I jump into the third section to talk about everyone's mood, let's give some more of your feedback. This was everything that came in through the poll. There's so much of this here. There must be like thousands and thousands of words feedback here. It was brilliant. Brora will release its inaugural release, says Menno. A 4-year-old for £350. It'll sell out within 2 days and fetch £70-ish on secondary. That's him having a wee bit of tongue in cheek. He goes on to say a lot more than that. Really fascinating feedback as well, Menno. Thank you. Aberfalls will be voted the best whiskey of 2025. I notice here from Whiskey Hike. Again, tongue in cheek. I suggest that Aberfalls doesn't even appear in the discourse for us because we're whiskey geeks and whiskey botherers, and Aberfalls chose to put out a product that was a cheap supermarket product, 40% ABV, but it was malt whiskey. Malt whiskey doesn't like being at 40% ABV. It's going to get hazy when it's cold. It's going to, those fats are going to, you need to keep the alcohol at 46% and above in order to avoid that happening. That's how you know that there's chill filtration going on most of the time below 46. Above 46 doesn't guarantee the lack of non-chill filtering, but we need to look for that because if you chill filter it, if you take out those fats, those oils, those flavor conductors, those The mouthfeel, everything suffers. You can't necessarily tell a chill filtered whiskey alongside a non-chill filtered whiskey. You can't. But put 5 or 10 chill filtered whiskies alongside 5 or 10 non-chill filtered whiskies, it's easy. So we very, very quickly build up our experience and understand that whiskies that's had nothing taken out of them are better. This is me speaking about malt, of course. Undoubtedly, says Sandy McDonald, some distilleries will go, but Aquavitae, he's saying, will continue to grow, as will my collection. Well, here's to your collection growing, but whether or not this channel grows, doesn't matter. I'd love the community to grow, though, Sandy. Thank you, Sandy. Supermarket brands will become cheaper while small brands become more expensive, says Jake. I think there's a lot of truth in that. We're seeing a real kind of rift happening. We're seeing these kind of I hesitate to use the word race to the bottom because it's been a kind of thing recently. It's kind of small storm or teacup thing. But there is a kind of race to the bottom happening with the cheaper whiskies, the bulk whiskies, the supermarket brands and things like that. That should be an area that's the blends, and the blend market is perfect for setting up. If you force malt down that avenue, like I say, time and time again, it doesn't want to go there. Could be a difficult year for many brands, says Tom Bollinger. He's saying lots of choice out there. The big names and the quality craft producers are likely to succeed better than the guys in the middle. It's again talking about that divergence happening. More price declines in the greater than 15-year-old releases, says Bar 2020, who's Glenn Robb. Yeah, I think we hope to see, especially 15-year-olds and above, we need to see those prices coming down. But I suspect that while that remains the most in demand and the rarest whiskey, probably the prices will stay the strongest. I don't know. We are now at the point where they are being oversold. They absolutely are. But they are, more often than not, when we talk about supply and demand, what we really hate to see is these contrived kind of scarcity things. Johnny Walker last year was a perfect example where they took, a parcel of stock from Cameron Bridge, their big grain distillery, and a parcel of stock from Rose Isle, their biggest malt distillery, and they married it together. Just put out 1,000 bottles of Johnny Walker to celebrate Jim Beveridge and World Whisky Day, and sold it for £1,000 a bottle, non-age statement. Utterly contrived, forced, invented scarcity. That's what we need to get away from. All the while recognizing that 15-year-old, 18-year-old, 21-year-old, 25-year-old whiskey is genuinely scarce. But I agree with you, Glenn, it's still being oversold. The political climate will have an impact on consumers in the form of more tariffs, I fear. I hope to see availability improve for some of our cherished brands as the whiskey boom subsides, says Mo. I hope for some of that too, especially for you guys like Mo, who's in far-flung markets that don't always get the same selection that we turn up every week and talk about on the vPub. Chris is saying my whiskey collection will be more valuable as currency during the zombie apocalypse. Are we all getting nostalgic for the lockdown years a wee bit and looking forward to the zombie apocalypse coming along? Krešimir Jelčić, Kreshi, good to see you, buddy. Good to see you, Krešimir, from Croatia. I got to hang out with Croatia. One of my highlights of 2024 actually was that trip. He's saying, I predict I'm coming to Scotland in October. I predict that is likely to be an accurate prediction, Krešimir. I hope that I can be part of your plans, buddy. Nice to have you in. Okay, let's get something else in the glass. I'm enjoying that wee Speyburn, but let's move on to the next one. And I randomly picked a 46% Daft Mill as well. This is the 2006 winter batch release. I've had it on the shelf for a wee while now. I do enjoy a wee light, ethereal Daft Mill. And if we talk about predictions, there may be something happening with this distillery and this channel in the months ahead in 2025. I'll say no more just now. Patrons already know about it. They've been kind of kept up to date. It's It's a remarkable privilege. I'm really, really excited about it. And guys, you'll get to know about what's happening all over there. But this is the winter 2006 release. I've had this on the shelf for a wee while. I've had it. I think I bought this pre-COVID even, but opened it much more recently. When was this bottled? Yeah, this was bottled in 2018. So actually one of their earlier bottlings, but fantastic stuff as well. It's always got that really, really light estery Madeira sponge cake note to it. Cheers, everyone. We predict we will be living in Scotland by October, says Hellswood. Oh my goodness, developments happening for the Widowsons making their way north of the border. Kind of surprises me and kind of doesn't at the same time, Helen. Good luck with everything. I hope it goes exactly the way you want it to go. David's over in Portugal saying, at the end of 2023, with a fine stash, my mood was to buy less, which I did in 2024, but trying more of the new distilleries. I get that there's still loads to discover in 2025. Mood change. I'm going to predict, David, that your comment that you've just made there might be the perfect way to sum up a lot of the discussion throughout tonight. Let's talk about mood. Let's go on to the mood thing, and let's imagine how we're feeling, how we see what we predict that we're going to do in terms of our purchasing for the year ahead. Because if we make predictions about the year ahead, surely they are absolutely connected. What we do in the year ahead as a community, as a whiskey buying community, and I don't just mean the Aquaviti channel, I don't just mean Barflies, I mean the wider whiskey community, directly affects the predictions that we're making about price, about availability, about the strength and health of whiskey, all of those things. So let's have a wee look. What is our buying intent? How are we feeling right now at the start of 2025? The question I asked was, what is your prediction for yourself and whiskey exploration in 2025? The biggest section here is the blue section here. And it was, I'll still be buying a few bottles. Okay. And then it increases in intensity. I'll be buying a fair amount of bottles for the red. The yellow is, I'll probably buy a lot of bottles. And then it kind of backs off a wee bit again with the green saying, I don't have a plan. I'm going to just go with my mood. So that's some pragmatism there. I don't really know what's ahead. I'm not planning anything. I know that I'm a bit fickle, unpredictable. That's fine. But the wee purple section there, I won't be buying any bottles. That's that thing I talked about. Anecdotally, I would have suggested to you that much, 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 much more of my community would have said they're not buying any more bottles. As it stands, that's 2.2%. Let's split it out. Let's visualize it a wee bit better. Every other section there, still buying bottles. I'll buy a fair amount of bottles. I'll buy a lot of bottles. I don't have a plan. I'll go with my mood, but I'm still going to buy bottles. 97.8% of people are intending to buy in 2025. People in my community that I polled from the 223, of course, that's the caveat here. But as I said, that number was remarkably solid. After about 50 or 60 votes were in, it wasn't moving much. And here is the sliver of people, 2.2%. We're talking about 4 people out of the people that responded saying they're on a ban. They're not going to be buying bottles in 2025. Surely that surprises you. That surprised me. It surprised me a hell of a lot. If this shows you why I should not be making these predictions. If I was to predict to you the answer of that question, I would have suggested to you that 25%, a quarter to a third of our community would have said, I'm out and I'm not buying any bottles in 2025. I suspect that number, that sentiment was much higher at the start of 2024. And the outlook actually for 2025, people are much more pragmatic. The mood is a wee bit more positive. And they're intending, just like David suggested, to explore a lot of these new interesting whiskies, new bottlings, new products that come along in 2025. What say you? Daniel Williams is here celebrating being a member for 48 months. My pal Daniel from the Netherlands saying, thinking of friends in California. I've got friends in California as well, buddy. They're fortunately very, very far away from it. A couple of them I know that are a wee bit closer to it, but still okay. Horrendous scenes, buddy. Absolutely. Nice thoughts. Peter M18 is saying, Aquavita going to have to dip now since it's a school night, but we'll catch the rest on replay. Cheers again, and we'll see you again next week. Nice to welcome you in. I know this is your first live, Peter. It's wonderful to have had you, buddy. If you're dropping back in on the replay, it's nice to have you here. Tony Nelson is saying, I sure hope Peter Lee is prepared to mule over our Daphne Aquavita bottles when he visits this summer. There's nothing happened yet. It might take some time. The impossible can happen immediately, but miracles take a wee bit longer, buddy. I'm glad you're excited for them. And obviously, as a patron, you're going to hear all about it first, Tony. Danny Hebington is saying, I'm buying less, but I'm failing miserably, and I'm 3 bottles in this year already. Danny, tell me what you're buying. What's excited you? I suspect that it's the whiskies that you've bought will betray what's exciting you right now. Is it because you're hearing about stuff, reading about stuff? Is it because you're finding stuff? Interesting. Gav's Drams, my pal in Edinburgh. Good to see you, Gav. I will buy less, but spend the same amount as last year. Less is more. It's a great sentiment, Gav. It really is. And I think it's got a lot to do with the first 2 questions I asked tonight when it becomes to how long have we been in? Are we fast tracking? Are we trying to catch up? Or have we become a bit more knowledgeable and discerning? Bruce Bernard is in. Good to see you, Bruce. He said, I've already bought 7 bottles this year. Wow. I think this is remarkably different sentiment from last year. Dan, that's DVDW. Dan, is that DVDW now? I'm confused. I think it's Dan. Aquavida, I think 20% or more would say they won't buy bottles to their partner, but they sure know they're lying, so they've no use in this poll. Well, hopefully the poll is then a wee bit more honest. Arnie is saying, I was always jamming and aching about whiskey collections in this community, and then realized I bought 40 bottles over the past 10 months, so I'm in for trouble. That's right. And I think that we have to keep within our limits. If we were to go out and buy a classic car, we'd spend thousands of pounds immediately. So over the course of 2 or 3 years, it's a wee bit like repayments on a classic car when you're building up a whiskey collection. Don't drink and drive. Don't conflate those two things. But what I'm saying is that if you're the type who gets interested in things, who falls down rabbit holes, it's rare for these rabbit holes to be free or inexpensive. But we have to admit that whiskey is a wee bit expensive. But 40 bottles over 10 months, golf, fishing, any other of the hobbies that you could fall into, give yourself a break, Arnie, as long as you're enjoying it. Alistair Gray is saying, I'm not buying any whiskey in 2025 until Glasgow release their next Manthania. I call you on that. When you break that promise to yourself, let me know about it, Alistair. Everyone is saying, clearly I have enough whiskey not to need to buy whiskey, but I will buy daily drinker replacements as I finish the bottle and things that pique my interest or are recommended. See, this is pragmatism coming in. We've tried the bottle bans in the past. We've tried these New Year resolutions, and we know that they often don't work for us. Chris Pollack is saying 2 bottles already this year, both signatory 100 proof series, Speyside M and Orkney HP. Fantastic. You're not spending a lot of money there either because they're great value, aren't they? Danny Hebington is saying Isla and Madeira 1770s and a Lag Corryvreckan. I've tried, now I'm buying. Fantastic, Danny. Those are good ones to have. They really, really are. Keith Duncan is saying, I'm just jumping on to wish all a happy new year. Up early tomorrow and we'll catch up and replay. I could say I'm not buying bottles in 2025, but I know it's a lie already. It's weird how in 1 year, Keith, this stubbornness has changed into this almost much more pragmatic view. Simone in New Zealand is saying, bought 6 bottles already this year. I know, but you're kind of halfway through the year. It's your summer, Simone. Give yourself a break, 6 bottles, that's worth roughly about 1 a month, isn't it? I can't dress it up. 6, that's almost a bottle a day or a bottle every day and a half. Fantastic. Good work. Ian at Whiskey and That. Good to see you, Ian. Man, fantastic. How are you keeping, buddy? Belated Happy New Year, Aquavita. I'll be buying bargain blends at auctions this year, hopefully. So there you go, a wee specialist. That's good because you can target a very thin vein where you're going to go to auctions, you're going to look for the old blends, and you're going to go after those. Fantastic. Good to have you in, Ian. Rob Smith is saying, I know I'm going to buy less, but several of my friends buying much more than they have the last few years. Interesting, Rob. Very interesting. Lucas is saying classic car and whiskey buying is a good idea. Oh, wait, it's not. Still, enjoy driving up from Bavaria to Isla in my old Mercedes. Oh, what do you have? How old is it, Lucas? An old W124? Something? I'm a wee fan of an old Merc myself. Dave Swift is saying our biannual festival 2025 Dramfest is so no point not trying to buy. 100% will cave. Yeah, Dave. It's so amazing. And David is back in again saying, I bet the best driver for mood change is finding bottlings where I don't have to choose between quality, presentation, and price. There's brands that care for us, so I can care back. What a wonderful sentiment. Amazing, Dave. Amazing, David. Great pragmatism. Adrian is saying definitely trying more value-oriented purchasing in 2025. A lot of great bottles for relatively not much money. Only bought a 20 CL Coleman, says Jeff Whiskey. Good to see you. And Jeff, so many comments that I can't keep up with. I've just lost that one. He said, no, I've got it back. The goal is that's it for 2025. Yeah, let's see. Let's see how you got on. And everyone's saying, if I'm 14 returns this year, I'll be in line to purchase. That was my prediction for 2-3 years in a row, right? Wasn't it? I don't know if it's ever going to come back. Maybe it'll be this year. The year I don't predict it, it'll be the year it comes back. Also was introduced to Ardmore and some blind samples and now interested in the distillery. Fantastic distillate. We have to get it through the Indies, of course. Okay, let's move on to our fourth. We're talking about our perspective. We're talking about what state we think whiskey is in 2025. I'm picking up the vibe, a general vibe of pragmatism, optimism. People are a wee bit more comfortable with, they've done the digital thing where they've bought, and then stop. But now we're seeing a bit more balance and a bit more measurement coming in, a bit more specialization in the likes of Ian talking about just going after his blends and things like that. Obviously, Chris Everwind deciding that he's going to specialize. He's going to look out for Ardmore, which I recommend heartily, a great distillery to explore. There's a lot of this going on. This is a different sentiment from last year. So the predictions that are happening, I suspect, could play out in the questionnaire, the poll, that things are maybe a wee bit more buoyant from our wee whiskey geek community, that is. What state do we think whiskey is in? Well, the question I asked you all was, looking ahead, pick the answer that best reflects how you feel about the whiskey scene in 2025. The options were, the first one was dark blue, no respondents to this one, boom time, things will pick up and it'll be a year of growth. Red, the tiny sliver there, saying, I am optimistic, can't wait for it. Then yellow starts to get bigger, 13.5% answered. It'll be much the same as 2024. A lot of people predicting much the same, quite a flat year, 2024. Some ups, some downs is the green section. I'm here for whatever. And 36.3% of you went for that. Almost half of you, 47.5%, decided to respond. There are rough roads ahead for many. We will lose some brands. And then finally, only 1.8 of you were the most pessimistic, saying this will be a disastrous year for whiskey as usual. This will be a disastrous year for whiskey, a reset, sorry. I'm not wearing my reading glasses tonight, so these words are a wee bit blurry to me at this distance. So there we go. Let's try and simplify this a wee bit. So if we split it down into this section here, this purple here, these are the pessimists at this top, this section here. So clear, 50% people think that the roads ahead will be rough or it's going to be a disastrous year for whiskey, a pure reset. Hardly anybody thinks that it's going to be a hard reset. Most people think it's just going to be rough and that we're going to lose some brands. I would have suspected 75, 80% would be answering along those lines, but it's a bit under half. That means that a wee bit over half are the optimism answers. I'm optimistic, I can't wait for it. It'll be much the same as 2024 with some ups, some downs, but we're here for whatever. This is kind of compounding more and more answer by answer, despite the fact that this is being answered by people who have already accumulated a huge amount of whiskey in the last 5 years. They are answering these questions. And half of them think that things are going to be static or good. People are pragmatic, they're optimistic. I keep using the same words over and over again, but that's because I sense the feeling of everything is that's the right words to use. Are we in a position that we're looking ahead at the state of whiskey? We're nervous for whiskey, I think. We're thinking that we might lose some brands, some companies might disappear. We already saw that happen in 2024, a rescue for Mackmyra in Sweden, Waterford going into administration, one of the independent bottlers, a single cask disappearing, and Penderyn shutting down one of their distilleries in Wales. I think there's going to be a wee bit more of that. Capacity, output cutting back. Some distilleries being mothballed for certain periods of the year. I hope in all of that it doesn't affect the job market too much. We've spent a lot of time building up a lot of knowledge and experience and craft in whiskey, quite honestly. It would be a shame to lose it now because we've been over-predicting for a few years. I think the last of the 5 questions asked has got so much to do with everything. We can talk about how much we intend to buy, how much we intend to accumulate, how much we want to share, how much we want to explore and get curious about in the year ahead. But if whiskey keeps coming out at 199 pop bottles for an inaugural Isle of Tyree, that's going to change all of these opinions and things. So it all hangs heavily on the back of what we can afford, what's accessible to us, what we find is fair, what we think will bring value. Gav's Ramsey saying, I feel for the quality of casks. You and I have had this conversation and we disagree. We do disagree. I think, Gav, for me, the industry has been through a significant period where there wasn't a lot of value put into casks. There was a lot of many times refill used, and they were still able to produce fantastic whiskey from it. And I suspect that was because there was a hell of a lot of time. We're not giving the whiskey the same amount of time now, so we need to have much more active casks. First fill bourbon, virgin oak, really active wine casks, really active sherry casks, and all of everything else that's becoming along as well. There needs to be balance. There needs to be less of this kind of really tired cask to super active casks. We need to work out a way to kind of balance the maturation and match it up with the spirit. Quality first rather than just pure variety. Quality first rather than just pure volume. Quality, quality, quality. I'll go back to your previous statement. You said yourself, Gav, you're going to spend the same amount of money but buy less. Fernando saying, Aquavitae, I'm already looking forward to seeing who sadly will follow in the footsteps of Mackmyra, Waterford and Penderyn. I don't even want to talk about it because I just don't want it to happen, but it may happen. Excess to Scotch is saying, Aquavitae, I'm also positive because the prices for whiskey are good in the Netherlands. You've always had good prices over there in the Netherlands, haven't you? Continental Europe, Germany as well, fantastic pricing. Yeah. And Cesare is saying, Aquavitae, Roy, how do you have whiskey picks for 2025, or what whiskey picks for 2025 do I have? Cesare, the future vPubs, that's going to be the topics. It's going to be much the same as 2023, 2024, it already was, me going through my kind of accumulation in the whiskies that I'm picking up as well. I don't have any predictions in that. I don't have anything that I'm particularly excited about or looking forward to. More from Ardnahoe, definitely. A certain release from Daftmill. Just that will be the content for the future vPubs. And Arnie Doodle Dram saying, I'm off to bed. Given I'll be spending my whiskey year with all of yous, I selfishly predict I'll be up as for it this year. Have a lovely evening, everyone. Good night, Doodle the Dram, Arnie. Come back for the quiz tomorrow, Arnie, and see how you got on, my friend. Nice to have had you in. Let's pour a different wee dram. Let's switch it up a wee bit. Should I go? I've got a Bruichladdich, a blend, and a World Whiskey here. Let's go for a wee sip of the blend. This is a wee blend from Turntable. This is actually one that's still available right now. A lot of the earlier ones have sold out now. This is All My Life, it's called. And I'll put the cork back in as I show you Yeah, this is good. If we talk about transparency, look at this for a blend. Now, it doesn't tell us exactly the age of all of these components, but you can find it out. 21% Glenallachie from First Fill X. What does that say? I'll read this out to you, but you can see on the back it's all written there. 21% Glenallachie, First Fill X Woodford barrels, 14% Balblier Limousin oak XO octaves, 16% Benriach First Fill bourbon barrels, 30% Knockdo First Fill Oloroso sherry butt, and 19% North British bourbon barrels. Only 19% of this is grain. 81% of this is malt whiskey. This is as good as suggesting this is a bottle of blended malt at that ratio. All my life. No peat, smoke or anything. Quite a rich nose, actually. What's bringing the richness? Some virgin oak, did we say in there? No. First fill bourbon, First fill Oloroso sherry. Some French oak. Fantastic. Cheers once more. One of the previous predictions on the vPubs in the past, it's really nicely balanced. Not picking up much of the European oak. Not in the first sip. The predictions that I was making was talking about the rise of blends, the rise of blends, the rise of blends. And I think we've seen that. We've definitely seen it. Certainly seen much more acceptance for the B word, blended, whether it's blends or blended malt. But it's not been a huge explosion, boof, everything. It's just been like, oh, here's another one. And then a few weeks later, here's another one, here's another. And I think we've, as a community, as whiskey drinkers, we've become much less snobbish. Can I use that word, snobbish? About single malts. We're only into single malts. We've realised that if we are true in what we say, that we love these whiskies for the quality and the flavour first, then it shouldn't matter the whiskey's definition. And that's what blends have shown me over the last few years. Things like this. Really super interesting things. My producer of the year is Thompson Brothers. We've got TBBSW. That's actually their 40-year-old that's sitting there right now. It was a fantastic treat, a treat to myself after doing a lot of work over the third quarter of last year. But it's standard TBBSW is just a fantastic whiskey. Buy it up while you can. It will disappear. Yeah, that's the 40-year-old. Super, super interesting and funky and mulchy and weird. This is much more kind of canny and balanced and easy and crowd pleasing. 46% ABV, all natural. Gorgeous, gorgeous deep colour that they get into it as well. It's wonderful what you can do without caramel. Superb blend, Roy, says Alistair Gray. Did you pick up a bottle yourself? Bit pricey, but you can't judge it based on the fact that it's an honest statement blend. You sip it and you drink it and you judge it based on the liquid and what you would have to pay to have a similar experience elsewhere. Inverary Whiskey Shop. Aquavita, I like to think that Ali still has a good relationship with Billy. He was assistant blender at both Glendronach and Glenallachie. Hopefully he can continue to get great casks direct. So I think that Ali's talking about Ali Stevenson and the Billy's talking about Billy Walker. Gene Kelly, Ali Stevenson is behind turntable, the Stevenson brothers, Gordon and Ali Stevenson. Gene Kelly saying 2024 was the year that I opened my arms and wallet to blends. So many are worth the investment. Gene Kelly, that Gene is music to my ears. Jimmy Legg, far less likely Jimmy Legg has opened his wallet and life to blends. Aquavita, I think the non-acceptance of blends is overstated in this community. I have no time for mass producers blended Scotch whisky, but always have had time for proper blends. I think that's fair, Jimmy. I think that is fair. So again, if we prioritize quality and flavour, the definition doesn't matter. I think we agree. Although I'm reticent about that. If we start to say that we agree, Jimmy, we've got a problem, right? Good. All right, the final one then. Let's actually just make sure that we're at slide. There we go. That's the right slide. The final one, question 5, asked you all about the elephant in the room, the price. Your predictions on price, what do you think is going to happen? I talked to you at length about, or not at length, but at the start of the vPub tonight about the fact that we've seen huge things happening on pricing in 2024. Huge initiatives, the likes of Signatory Vintage 100 Proof Series, fantastic value. I held up some bottles in the vPub last year and asked you all, why? What motivates you to buy anything else when there's fantastic independent 100 proof whiskies out there at 45 quid a bottle? And of course, we are voracious in our exploration. We're promiscuous. We're into everything, but we'll still pick up a great value 100% proof whiskey when it comes along. We also saw huge discounts happening right across all the retailers, most of the big online retailers and things like that, whether it was flash sales, discount offerings, everything that told us that they're trying and working really, really hard to get product and stock moving. We saw huge discounts happening through Amazon and things like that. Really tempting things. I held off and then ended up getting suckered into 2 of the biggest discounts for Diageo special releases. And that was 2023 releases of Talisker and Lagavulin. In fact, the Lagavulin might have been the 2022. No, I think it was 2023. £50. In the case of the Lagavulin, that was 1/3 of the retail price. The Talisker was a bit less than 50% of the retail price. Incredible, crazy steps. So are these harbingers of the future, or were these just in order to get through the rough patches that came along in 2024? So the way I put it to you guys, I asked you, pick which option best describes how you feel about what will happen to prices in whiskey for the year ahead. That big blue section here, the second biggest proportion of you, 34.1%, decided to say, we will see some attenuation in the prices. They'll get a little lower. Some of you went on to say, we will see significant price drops and significant drops in prices. That was the red section, 6.3%. By far the biggest majority of you, or proportion of you, 39% of you, in the yellow said prices will stay much the same as 2024. Green was a bit more pessimistic. We will see a steady increase in prices, almost 20%, 19.3% of you say that. And then purple, only 1.3% of you were extremely pessimistic and said we will see large increases in prices. So some of you are remaining pessimistic, but only 1.3%. Let's summarize it a wee bit. Let's break it down into blocks. The pessimism, 19.3, 1.3%, 20%, 1 in 5 of you are pessimistic about prices going into 2025. That's fascinating to me once more. And it fits with the general vibe of optimism for 2025 that has taken me by surprise. Because that means that 1 in 5 of you are pessimistic, 4 in 5 of you are in some way optimistic. 40% of you either suggest that it's going to be attenuated a little or significant drops will happen in 2025. And then the rest of you think that it's going to be much the same as 2024. And we haven't seen much the same happening year to year in a long, long time. So more than 3/4 of you are either more of the same or optimistic for the future. That is super surprising to me. Probably even more surprising than the fact that some of the other facts that I shared with you about the general optimism for the future. Chris is saying, I think we're getting overwhelmed with special releases, barrel picks, and there's just not the appetite or shelf space for all this whiskey. Something has to give. I agree with you, Chris Everwind. Just because there's, here's a barrel, here's a special edition, here's a special edition. I agree with you completely. There's too much of it. And the reason that they're doing that is to generate sales and to generate things and to make it that we need to get a bit more focus into just making good rather than many. Quality over variety, quality over volume. Simone in New Zealand said increase in excise duty will have an impact. 1st of February in the UK, there's more duty getting hammered onto whiskey again. I mean, it's just ridiculous how heavily it's taxed. Something else that we're dealing with in the year ahead. It will have an effect. It'll land on the shoulders of the producers, the distributors, the agents, the retailers. It'll land on the shoulders, definitely, of the consumer. And a very whiskey shop is saying there's a guaranteed 2% duty increase in February. Apart from that, general feedback is the prices won't go higher. That's a retailer speaking right there. Thanks, Mike. Dorpass Whiskey Tim is saying, where I am, we saw big inflation in 2022. So not sure about how much more the market can bear. Hope for level prices, question mark. How about a bit of attenuation? How about a lot of the nonsense and the, forgive the French, piss-taking stops? Opportunism stops. Polishing turds stops. Premiumization of something that is not premium, pretending that something is scarce when it's not scarce. Just stop all of this lily gilding and bring back integrity. Don't market something saying that it's traditional and honest and craft and integrity at its heart, and then just be super cynical about everything that you do. Good to see Ben, Whiskey with Molly, and good to see you, buddy. Dave Swift is saying this reflects global markets to a certain degree, given your audience. I think you're right, Dave. Whiskey August saying governments are addicted to tax. Some things never change, but it seems to get worse. It's weird. Don't think it'll ever stop, unfortunately, says Hillswood. So there is a bit of pessimism coming from the chat right now. But I think all of you are surprised right now that 40% are optimistic, 35% are pragmatic, and less than 25% of you are pessimistic for the future of pricing in 2025. A word of warning on that, though. If we do go into 2025 because of duty increases, because of political tariffs, because of increased cynicism from producers, retailers, supply chain, distributors, reps, whatever it may be, if we do see increases in 2025, we're kind of setting ourselves up to have a really quite significant reaction to it. I'll stand with you on that. If we continue to see abuse in pricing, I don't care that I'm becoming a wee bit boring and tedious, and here's Roy talking about pricing again. 2025, I will call it out, and I'll call it out loudly. I might get some of it wrong, and there might be somebody that has to step up and say, no, Roy, there's a reason for this. It's this price because ... But I suspect if I am reacting like that, it is a measure of the wider community and audience reacting like that. So the feedback should still be necessary. They haven't communicated why it's costing so much, as an example. It's one of the focuses for 2025. We have to see these prices come down. We have to see reality, pragmatism, fairness, integrity, just basic ethics coming back into pricing policies again. Tommy Elmer is saying, I think we'll see continued price increases throughout the fall, then prices will fall. Just my humble opinion, he's saying. It'll be interesting. So price increases through the fall, so price increases right up till autumn, and then next winter time we'll start to see the prices fall again. So you still think that we're not at the peak yet, Tom? Gene Kelly saying, I think price decreases are inevitable, but it may take a lot longer to kick in here in the USA due to on-hand stocks needing to be depleted before price. But it's not just on-hand stocks in the retail chain, is it? Because we've seen that cask investment bubble explode and burst. So there's a lot of people with stocks, cask stock on hand that they've overpaid for, that they're going to be trying to get their money back as much as possible. It's going to take a while for that to come through as well, in terms of how much money the big bulk producers are making and how much casks they're willing to free up onto the market in order to allow independent bottlers and people like that, creative blenders and things, to make good products at good prices. It's going to be interesting to see how long that takes to trickle through as well. Jimmy is saying, okay, Aquaviti, my promise to open more whiskey is starting. I'm pouring some of the 35-year-old Brora sample you gave me. Oh, now tell me, Jimmy, why is it not opened and sipped a long, long time ago? Should that not have been your Christmas dram, your New Year's dram? Any time is the right time. Lucas is saying, Aquavita, your alcohol taxation is crazy. People won't drink less because of it. I know. But that means that they get more money because of it, unfortunately. More comments from you before I move on. Independent bottles will rise, says Major Nut. Yeah. I think it's inevitable, as I've just said, if more casks are made available or if the price of the casks drop. But I'm worried about a lot of the casks that's been paid by the independent bottlers right now. They're going to need to try and get some of that money back. There might be ways to offset it, of course. Throughout these whole pages, one word that keeps being repeated and repeated and repeated. If there's a huge American audience here in the vPub, of course, they're talking about tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. They're very worried about it, as we are worried about it here too in Scotland. A year of change for sure, but don't foresee the massive bursting of the bubble. Lots to be excited for, says Gordon Burniston. Thanks for your optimism, buddy. The most interesting products released in 2025 will come from newish distilleries and indies, says Craig. That looks like Dwan. Is it Owen? Craig Dwan. I absolutely agree with you, Craig. We've seen that for the last few years. No reason for it to change in 2025. And in fact, I put it to you and I agree with you that it's likely to get more exciting. Stefan K is the guy who gave me this, interestingly, this Speyburn 10. He's just saying one word in his feedback: mergers. That's his prediction for 2025, mergers. Drinks Whiskey is going on to say we'll see a few independent brands flourish. A couple of smaller distilleries do a Glasgow and come to the forefront, and big brands will struggle as their in the race to premiumization leaves them boxed in with no one interested in buying overpriced entry-level bottles. I really hope that's the case, buddy. I really do. The Glen Mavis Thrasher, my goodness. I used to live in Glen Mavis once upon a time. The multinationals will split their products in two, part for the mass market consumer, part for this whole prefer integrity forward malts. The price for the latter will drop to make them more competitive with smaller integrity distilleries as attempts are made to squeeze the latter. Again, quite an interesting dynamic. There are people predicting this divergence is going to continue, this gap between the kind of casual mass market whiskies and the really integrity forward kind of natural craft presented, however you want to describe it. That's just going to continue to divide, and I think that would be a shame because there's a lot of stuff lost in the in between. Think of all those gorgeous workhorse distilleries that we love: Chininic, Ardmore, Ben Rinnes, so many more, right? That could come a cropper of that. Maybe the independent bottlers will have our backs there over on this side of things. Barley will start to get more attention than cask type, predicts the Alchemist. That's my pal Sevi. Wow. I hope that is the case, actually. If there was a bit more kind of less reliance on cask, but more celebration of cask, and then a lot more focus and celebration on barley. I think that is, and I think it's been happening for a while, but of course, if we focus on barley, we tend to be talking about the start of the production, so it takes years to bleed through. We talk about cask, it's much more kind of up to date and a wee bit more relevant, of course. Many new small distilleries will open, many large older ones will be mothballed, says Graham Fraser. We know that that's going to happen because there's already investment. There's already these distilleries coming on board, these smaller ones. The larger ones being mothballed. I think, unfortunately, you're probably right. And finally, hopefully the collapse of the cask trading markets serves them right, says Joe Shepherd. I'm right with you, Joe. I hate that people are losing money on this nonsense, but that was a huge exacerbation effect there that was happening in whiskey generally. That led to the overvaluation of whiskey out there. It was nonsense. It needs to never raise its head again. Reversion to the 2019 prices and demand predicts Greg S. Well, that would be nice. Hello. If I recall 2019, Greg, I remember that back then we were complaining about prices. Before we go into the quiz at the end, I'm going to jump in to see what you guys are saying as I pour right on cue with Sevi's comment about barley. Here we have an organic barley distilled after mashing and fermentation with organic barley way back in 2012 by Bruichladdich. 50% ABV this is. Fantastic whiskey. Like I say, always look at the level to betray how much you're enjoying something. One of the reasons I love to share this with people, this wee Bruichladdich, I love it. But the texture. And a weird thing that sometimes I can get buy-in from people when I share it, but not all the time. It might just be me and certain people, but when I sip certain whiskies, the room temperature, the ambient temperature, the temperature of me or whatever, it doesn't. Some whiskies taste cool, and other whiskies can taste warm. And it's not about ABV. And it's not necessarily about kind of coastal outdoors. It's not kind of about menthol and mint elements and things like that. It's about texture. It's about just the way the whiskey plays on your palate. And my experience with this organic barley, it's going to be interesting to see if it happens tonight, is that it's a cool sensation. Yeah, a wee bit. Yeah, a wee bit. Genuinely a wee bit. Might be a wee bit to do with the herbaceous side of things. Like I say, the menthol, slightly eucalyptus thing. But I think it's got so much to do with the texture, the lovely light fruit and flavour. 50% ABV helps this whiskey so much. You know, I've got my wee water jug here, but I don't feel the need to reach for it. I think I like it. It's just nice and poised and firm and full. It is 50%. And I have to say, it probably won't be the 2012 that I replace it with. I'll maybe buy a newer version, but this wee organic barley from Bruichladdich, I might look out for the beer barley or something else. I'm not sure, but I will be replacing this. I've loved the products coming out of Bruichladdich. Prices are becoming a challenge here and there, but you know, they do beguile and seduce us when we actually get them in the glass. Cheers. No NFTs this year. Again, Danny, one of these things that's just gone. The idiotic companies that jumped on board, right? Access to Scotch is saying Brexit killed the amount of whiskey I could take with me from Scotland from 10 litres to 1 litre a person. Brexit killed a hell of a lot more than that. An incredible self-harm. And Veruri Whiskey Shop is saying, I don't think the Trump regime will bring the malt tax back, as this was an initial reaction to an EU issue about the airplane parts. Hopefully a one-off issue. We hope that too, but I think that what everyone's worried about there is just this kind of almost weaponization of tariffs, generally in order to meet other goals. It's not anything to do with it. So we're all kind of waiting just to see. We're all a wee bit nervous as to see what happens. But you can only really worry about the things that you can control. Let's be honest. Everyone is saying an indicator that we should pursue is that distilleries reducing production. That's a bellwether for the future. Need to talk to Ingvar. Yeah, Ingvar's got his finger on the pulse, absolutely. It'd be nice to get Ingvar back behind the. It'd be nice to come up with a good topic that could get him interested. That could be interesting for the community as well. Fantastic guy, Ingvar, and be nice to get him back on for his input and things. Bruichladdich is the best Port Charlotte. Roy Bruichladdich is the best. PC10 is my pick, always, says Cesare. I have to say, it's a pretty good wee whiskey. Handsome wee whiskey, the PC10. 60 quid's a bit pricey though. Alistair Grace saying in 2025, whiskey will bring people together, and that's all that matters. Well, it's doing it right now at the start of 2025. No difference, right, Alistair, than what it's been doing for years. And I think that one of our takeaways has to be that whiskey goes up and down. Whiskey increases and decreases. Production capacity, whiskey lochs, warehouses, costs, everything swells and settles. The community stays pretty stable. The consumption stays pretty stable. It's incredible to me that you know, despite the fact that whiskey has seen these kind of almost digital toggle on off things over 2020, 2021, 22, 23, 24, you know, it's like we're buying, we're not buying, we're buying, we're not buying. That's just what we buy, what we spend on whiskey doesn't often represent what we are actually consuming in whiskey. I would love to see more balance come into things. I don't see how that can be possible. And I'm looking at it from my perspective. It's just, That's probably what needs to happen. We need more new blood. I've got a wee slide here. I think I summarised this, but the takeaways that I had earlier, and let's share it with you. Our community needs new blood. We need to make sure that we're making a welcoming space that's accessible for everybody in order to make sure we are not alienating new people to come into the community. We are very good at that. We're very good with a guiding hand, making it a welcoming space, being patient with people, making sure that they don't feel shame for their lack of knowledge or their ignorance or their assumptions or their preferences, because we know that in time whiskey teaches us not to say I don't like and all of these things. But we need to be patient. That's us. The whiskey industry needs to make sure that they're removing barriers. Far too much variation, far too many releases, far too much variety on the shelves. And I'm just speaking about from individual distilleries and producers. Focus on less variety, more quality. Make it less intimidating for people to step into. That's easy to do all of these things when our knowledge pool is so rich. What we need is our wisdom and our attitude to match that, what we know about whiskey. I'm speaking about us as a community, but I'm also speaking about the business side of things as well, the industry. They know what they need to do. Don't be greedy. Be fair. Go long term instead of short term or medium term. Nobody's going to listen. Nobody's going to change. It's the structure of it all, right? But it's obvious. We remain whiskey curious, despite the fact that so many of you have been into whiskey for years and years and years and years, despite the fact that Alistair is certain that he's not going to buy this, and the next thing in the year ahead. I know for a fact he will, because he loves it. You're not a sucker. You're just caught up in the love of whiskey, and it's a safe place. As long as we stay within our own limits of consumption, our own limits of financial outlay, all of these things, this is a good thing to enjoy. Whiskey volumes and growth will struggle. That's not to say it's going to drop. Whiskey volumes will struggle for growth. They will not see the growth that they've seen over the last couple of decades, for sure. That's already been clear over 2024. But I also feel that they will not see huge dramatic drops either. The overproduction that we've seen has been too much. The consumption is remarkably similar. Prices will continue to need attention. I wasn't confident suggesting in summary that prices would get attention. I wasn't confident that we would actually see attenuation there in pricing, but there's no question that it's needed. It's very difficult for these producers, especially the ones that have been trying really, really hard to come across as a premium brand, a luxury brand, because discounting your product doesn't match that image. Cheapened products is not a good look. Fair, honest, cool products is what they need to go for. Things that we are happy to share, buy, evangelize about. It's not that hard. Look at Ardnamurchan, look at Ardnahoe. Brand new players on the scene just seem to have the magic sauce, and they're doing everything pretty reasonably. More of that. Look at Arran, the success of Arran since 1995. Look at the continued success of Springbank, who guarantee they know that they're going to sell everything that they make every time they make it. Ups and downs of the market be damned. We might see Springbank sit on the shelf a wee bit longer. We might see Daffmill continue to sit on the shelf a wee bit longer. But they will sell everything that they make. I also think that the smaller producers, the smaller distilleries, are protected somewhat by their scale in that respect. Just make sure I've brought in the quiz for the quiz at the end. 2-hour mark. Wow. Whiskey Hog is saying, I'm trying to be more of an evangelist rather than sharing drams with the converted. Sadly, my conversation rate is not great. My conversion rate, sorry, is not great. Don't worry about it. The fact that you are willing and the fact that you've got people to share whiskey with, that's a pretty good start, Whiskey Hog. And it's nice to have you in here as well. Tommy Elmer is saying, do you think American single malt category will have an impact? Absolutely a huge impact. But we talk about scale. You know, we're talking about in America, you know, just these distilleries that are making everything, and they also make whiskey. So they're listed as a whiskey distillery, but they don't specialize in it. Fine. Still making a whiskey, and often a very, very good whiskey. Maybe rye, maybe a mixed blend, a mixed mash bill, maybe their take on bourbon. But certainly they're making their own single malt. It's been ratified recently, of course, with it's now a defined thing. But the scale is tiny. It's not going to make it here. It's often not going to make it outside of its own state. So the impact that it's going to have is to cannibalize whatever market was already existing there. So it could affect exports. It absolutely could. Then what will happen is the inevitable fight over price, when I hope that what we actually prioritize is differentiation. American single malt cannot be Scotch, for example. Scotch can't be Irish. Irish can't be American single malt. They are different things. Don't fight on price. Fight on flavour and quality. I know I'm naive. I know I am. Be interesting to see what effect, Tom, American single malts have in the years ahead. Anyway, I've enjoying this wee book, laddie. I'm going to pour a community drama as I finish out. I was raking my brain for who bought me this and left it for me, this Overream. I think this was Glenn Duncan, and if I've made a mistake there, I'm hugely embarrassed and really, really sorry, but I'm going to pour myself a wee Tasmanian world whiskey to finish off. Talk about this, the generosity of the community, the variation that's coming from world whiskies. It's never ending. We've never seen whiskey like this before. Never seen this amount of choice and variety, and it's hard to keep up. Thanks for listening tonight. Cheers. Oh, very bourbon-like. Bourbon cask. Oh, a wee bit of a winey element on the finish. Cask strength, wow, 60% ABV. Bourbon cask mature, distilled and aged at Old Hobart Distillery, Tasmania. Usually I'll write, type, or label the bottles. I think there was a label on this when it came back from the festival weekend, but it's since been lost. Now I'm embarrassed. I don't remember who this came from. Whoever it was, thank you. Yeah, very bourbon-like. Does a not bad job of hiding its ABV. Quite tasty. Not too hot, not too spicy. Very oaky. Cinnamon, nutmeg, caramels. It's very difficult to get a hold of Tasmanian whiskey here in the Northern Hemisphere, certainly in UK and Europe. Okay, who's up for hanging out with me for another 10, 15, 20 minutes more till we have the first quiz at the end of 2025? Danny is saying, how's your cask getting on? It's getting on okay, Danny. I've added a few more things in there. I took an initial sample from it, and, you know, always you feel like you've ruined it, but you leave it for a while, leave it to marry, leave it to settle, go back in again, and you're quite pleasantly surprised. So I'm not designing anything with my cask. What's going in there is bottles that I've finished with, bottles that I don't need around anymore, dregs, all of that kind of thing. And there are some bottles that I'm buying specifically to add in. Some, let's say, reasonably priced higher strength ABV whiskies that I think might add a good quality aspects to the barrel, the cask. I'm adding those into more on that in the topics and things I'll be able to weave that cask into in vPubs ahead in the future. Aye, guess the quiz, says Dan. Is it Dan? I think it's Dan. I feel like it's Dan, but I'm rusty last year. Danny Heavington is saying, oh, I picked up that one, Danny. Thank you so much. All right. Good luck, everyone. For those of you that have stayed till the end, this is multiple choice. If I talk about keeping things accessible for newbies And then you bring up these questions at the quiz at the end, and it's like, how new people, it's just intimidating. It's really, no, the quiz is here. The people are answering in real time. You can lean on them. If you can guess, it's multiple choice just for fun. You can just try and measure how your knowledge is growing over week to week to week, month to month, whatever it may be. It's there for fun. You're only ever playing against yourself. You can lean on the community. You can lean on the chat in order to get your 50%, 5 out of 10 pass mark. But it's just meant to be fun and pique your curiosity, maybe inspire you to go off and understand a wee bit more. This is not going to be an easy one to start off 2025, but the quiz will start off pretty easy, as it always does. Good luck, everyone. Everyone just saying barflies, Happy New Year. Need to run. Chris, come on. Enjoy drinking and chatting with everyone. Always a highlight of the week. It's always a highlight of my week to have you in here as well. Greg is here. Good to see you, Greg. Watchman999. Kalila in the glass. Let's do this. Rafael Rutka, it looks like a new name. Happy New 2025. He's saying year for all Whisky and Aquavite fans. Good to have you in, Rafael. Nice to have you joining for the quiz. Okay, here goes. Peahead is already answering with an ABC for question 1. Which of the following companies was once owned by Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, or, as I understand, Moet Hennessy Louis Vuitton, it might actually be known as. But LVMH owned which of these companies? A, Glenmurray, B, the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, or C, Ardbeg? Once upon a time, which of the following companies was owned by LVMH? What say you? See, you just need to look. Craig McGinnis in, good to see you, Craig. Big Ed is here, Glenn B, Joseph Smith, Black Fen, good to see you, Conrad. Raphael is playing along, Mikey is here, so good to see you, Mikey. Sean Haltgrave. Sean, that might be a new name. You're a barfly. Thanks for your support, and it's nice to welcome you in. Whiskey Slayer, Nicholas, Whiskey and Wine Trails, Tom is here. Jerry Miller and Bruce Cesare all playing along, fantastic. Road to Dram, good to see Alberto playing along at the end, despite the fact you're an hour ahead in Italy. Sugar Kitty, thank you so much, Sugar Kitty, for your support of this channel as an admin, as a moderator, as a shield, and also as a recent patron. I will reach out to you there. Thank you for your support. Whiskey Augustine Agavite was, as in no longer is. Good point. I can tell you that Glenmurray was once owned by Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy. The Scotch Malt Whisky Society was once owned by Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy. Ardbeg is today owned by Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy. But truthfully, they're all correct. You might want to consider that the way I've worded the question is I've put a wee grey tick there for Ardbeg. They are, strictly speaking, owned still. But it's also true to say that that does actually mean by default they were once owned by LVMH. All correct. Nobody's going home with a donut tonight. Everybody's getting a point. Welcome to 2025. Things are going to get harder from here on in. Question 2. Springbank has plans to build an experimental micro distillery on their site in Campbelltown. But which of these distilleries already has such a feature? A, Loch Lomond, B, Dornoch, or C, Glenmorangie? Which of those facilities already has a micro distillery on site? Legoland. Legoland does actually have a whiskey distillery, doesn't it? Certainly, the Legoland, sorry, in the UK has, in its miniature village, I think it does have a wee tiny distillery there. But no, not quite that micro. And Whisky Veritas, Oliver, good to see you. He's saying B is a micro distillery. Just before I announce this, I should, there's a tasting coming up in Glasgow. No, I think that's it. Just about sold out now, so I won't announce it. I won't mention it. The Thompson Brothers on the 20th of January at the Bonaccord, joint hosted by me and the Thompson Brothers. I think all of you know about it through Patreon already, or through the Aquavitae Barflies page. Nothing micro about Loch Lomond Aquavitae. Jimmy Legg is saying C. Absolutely, you're all spot on. We are talking about Dornoch is already pretty micro. Loch Lomond is nothing but micro, exact opposite. And Glenmorangie, it's a pretty big distillery in itself, but it has the Lighthouse Distillery on site, which is an experimental set-up. Question 3. The 16 Men and Glen of Tranquility were advertising campaigns successfully employed to see Glenmorangie do what? What did the 16 Men and the Glen of Tranquility campaigns achieve for Glenmorangie? A. It saw them become the #1 UK whiskey brand. B. It saw them outsell Glenfiddich in the 1990s. Or C. It saw them become Scotland's best-selling malt. The 16 Men of Tain and the Glen of Tranquility. 2 advertising campaigns by Glenmorangie. GWTC says Petehead, go with the crowd. I lost a flask to the trash at Legoland in Florida. They would not let me in with it. That's terrible. A hip flask. That is terrible. It's really terrible. One of the reasons that Disneyland Paris failed when it was first launched here, I think way back in the early 90s or late 80s, whenever it was, is that it was alcohol free. You can't tell Europeans they can't have alcohol. It just doesn't happen. So they had to change the legislation at Disneyland in Florida. Sorry, in Paris. Ben Damon Hunt is saying, I don't know, a sheep again, C. It's splitting the crowd a little bit here. It's a tricky one, despite only being question 3. Tommy Elmer is saying you didn't have to go in. I was told the 10-year-old used to be the best-selling whiskey in Scotland by Ralphie, right? Jimmy Legg, you're absolutely right. Ralphie's right as well. The #1 UK whiskey brand for forever has been Glenfiddich, occasionally Glenlivet, more recently Jura. Outselling Glenfiddich in the 1990s. Unfortunately, that's never happened, but it did become Scotland's best-selling single malt, which it was right up until very, very recently, where I think it's been overtaken by Jura also. Question 4. Ardbeg features purifiers on the line arms, returning condensed spirit. So the condensed spirit that is condensed in the line arms, the liquid returns into the stills for redistillation. It's a very specific thing. Which of these trios feature the same device? Okay, I'm going to give you 3 lists of 3, and you tell me which 3 is the same as Ardbeg. A. Benriach, Benromac, and Ben Nevis all have purifiers. Or B. Ardnamurchan, Ardnahoe, and Ardmore all have purifiers. Or C. Glenlossie, Glengrant, and Glenspey all have purifiers. Daisy Vleeland, good to see you, Daisy. How are you keeping? You very well. Happy New Year. Lachlan McKenzie's here. Danny Hebbington is celebrating 3 out of 3. Ben Whiskey with Molly is saying just back from the loo. Jimmy Legg is saying, I don't know this. Follow the crowd. Follow the crowd. Whiskey and Wine Trails. Tom is going for C. Gene Kelly, also C. Kel Taylor saying no, it's C. Tommy Elmer is saying C. C. Loads and loads of people saying C. Dan is going against the crowd saying going to guess A. But Sean, Daisy, Excess to Scotch, Craig McGinn, all saying C. Lassie Hort Otsman, good to see you. Lassie saying C. Grainer Walt James, Glen B, also saying C. You're absolutely right. The 3 Glens, Glenlossie, Glengrant, and Glenspey, along with Ardbeg, all feature purifiers on their line arms. Well done. It's good to go along with the crowd. How many are holding a 4 out of 4 together now as we go into the picture question at the end. It's a Pictish stone. I won't tell you the name of it right now. I got this picture off the web. But this is actually a reconstruction. This has been remade. The original is in a museum now. But I'm just going to ask you, this stone is near which of these 3 distilleries? This stone is near A, Glenmorangie. This stone is near B, Ardbeg. Or the stone is near C, Glenmurray. And I apologise to people that listen to this podcast style through audio. That means that but I'm looking at a Pictish stone with various Celtic designs on it. Tall rectangle. Portrait style. Yes. Which distillery is it near? Glenmorangie, Ardbeg, or Glenmurray? Easy. Whiskey with Molly. Ben is saying it's the Cadball stone. Spot on, Ben. Absolutely. Can't hide it from any of you. There is close to Ardbeg. There's obviously the Celtic cross, the Kildalton cross. But this is actually only about 8 or 10 miles from Glenmorangie. Actually, walking distance on the grounds of Glenmorangie House, which I have never visited, but it's not far from Glenmorangie. So if you answered A for Glenmorangie, you're absolutely right. Question 6, things are going to get pretty tricky from here on in. Which of the following distilleries has its own village or had, past tense, had its own village with housing for 40 workers' families and even had a school with over 100 pupils until the distillery closed in 1981? We are talking about A, Ardbeg on Islay, B, Brora in the Highlands, or C, Glenmorangie in the Highlands. Which of these distilleries had its own wee village, thriving, 40 workers' families housing on site, a school, its peak had over 100 pupils at the school? Just a question that shows just how much closure of distilleries in these remote communities can decimate the lifestyle of these remote places. It's great when everything's on the up and up. It's great when it's boom time, isn't it? And then suddenly somebody somewhere makes a decision. It's almost like hitting a button or toggling a switch. Mike Molasses is saying, it's perfect, Mike. I love that I know this, he's saying. And Fernando's saying, following you on this, he's going for B. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Mikey Hayes saying C. Graham Malt is saying A. So Mike Molasses is saying, I love that I know this. But what has he actually answered? No. Give us your answer, Mike. Come on. Was your Brora all gone? Close, Jimmy. It's very close. You can join it. You're hoping for a wee bit more. That's all that's left, my friend. So it'll be killed off some point very, very soon. I managed to stay away from it over the course of Christmas and New Year. Not much of it left now. It's been good. Okay, come on. People starting to say A for Ardbeg, A for Ardbeg. A would make sense, is my vote, says Cal Taylor. I was waiting for Mike Molasses, but he's keeping his cards close to his chest, I think. But I can tell you that indeed it was Ardbeg Village on Islay that had 40 workers' houses, shops, post office, even a school. They had a regular village. The distillery closed in 1981, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And the village, there's a few houses there. There's still some people living out at Ardbeg, of course, but you can't really call it much of a village anymore. Question 7 told you it would get a bit trickier. What was Glenmorangie Distillery called when it was founded back in 1843? What was Glenmorangie's distillery's original name? Was Glenmorangie called A, Minmore, B, Turlogie Farm, C, Morangie? What was Glenmorangie called when it was founded in 1843? Minmore, Tarlogie Farm, or Morangy? Graham Fraser is in. I would suggest that if you are following any of the crowd, Ben Whisky with Molly, Graham Fraser, two people that you could do worse than following. It's hard to trip those guys up. Whiskey Games Matt Bishop is saying, I think I'm very late to the vPub. No such thing, Matt. Nice to have you in, buddy. Gonna guess again, says Dan. He's going for A. C, going with the flow, says Lachlan McKenzie. And Whiskey Hog is guessing B. Seb K, good to see you in, Seb. How are you keeping, my friend? I think that's the Seb K in Portugal, although it looks like a new wee watermelon-esque icon there. Perhaps it's a different Seb. Regardless, it's good to have you here. Okay, I can tell you that those that answered C for Morangy are correct. Tarlogie Springs is the name of the water source. Minmore was the original name for Glenlivet. Morangy is the answer I was looking for those of you that said C. So there's been a bit of attrition there. Quite a few of you. Whiskey with Molly, Ben still in on a 7. Lachlan's on a 7. Jerry Miller on a 7. Ginger Genius on a 7. Cesari's on a 7. Hellswood 7. Daisy's on a 7. Blackfen Conrad on 7. Simone in New Zealand on a 7. Nicholas on a 7. George P. My goodness, lots and lots of you on 7 out of 7. Fantastic. Well done. Let's continue. Let's see if we can keep it. Question 8, according to Charlie McLean's Wikipedia, what has Bill Lumsden of Glenmorangie been described as? So this is a direct take from the latest edition of Charlie McLean's Wikipedia. What has Bill Lumsden been described as? A, Whiskey's Dr. Doolittle. B, Whiskey's David Copperfield. Or C, Whiskey's Willy Wonka. I was reading the Wikipedia and this popped up and I thought, wow, really? So there you go. Never heard them referred to this way before, but apparently it's a thing. Dr. Bill Lumsden, the guy behind so many of the Glenmorangie products, Tale of Tokyo, Tale of the Forest, Tale of Cake, Tale of Ice Cream, plus all the run-of-the-mill Glenmorangies, many of which I am a fan of, I have to say. Bill Lumsden should buy Tormore. Sukhinder won't let him have it. I'll have to say that I would love to have a 46% 10 or 12-year-old Glenmorangie original. But there's other things out there to keep us busy, I suppose. Okay. And behind the Beyonce whiskey as well, right? Yeah, he was a collaborator for the Sir Davis. That's absolutely right, Kyle. Or make the Statue of Liberty disappear. Never heard him talk to the animals. Or make the Statue of Liberty disappear, says Ben. Absolutely right. He is referred to, apparently, according to Charlie McLean's Wikipedia, as Whiskey's Willy Wonka. It's quite funny because the Chocolate Factory, or Willy Wonkaville, is often Loch Lomond Distillery always gets suggested that that's what that place is, where they can make anything. Second from last. Question 9. Good luck. As early as 1880, Glenmorangie malt was what? I'm going to give you 3 facts. 2 are made up and 1 is true. It's really hard. There should be an asshat icon here. You just have to find the true statement. As early as 1880, Glenmorangie malt was A, exported to Italy and the Vatican. B, being advertised over radio. C, accompanying Robert Falcon Scott on his expeditions to the Antarctic. 1880, what was Glenmorangie doing? It was being exported to Italy and the Vatican. It was being advertised over the radio, or it was going to the Antarctic with Robert Falcon Scott. Too slow saying, come on. Take your time, Rob. Take your time. Think. Jimmy is saying B is so boring. Being advertised over radio in 1880 is so boring. Graham Fraser is saying this is obscure, Roy. Think, Graham. Take a pause. If I'm troubling Graham Fraser, we're doing something here. James is saying, let's go A. What's your thinking behind that, James? Gene Kelly, Big Ed, Dave Swift, Watchman, A. All of them. Glenn B is saying A. Tobias. Everyone's saying A, actually. Whiskey Hog A. Cesare is saying A. Everyone thinks it's been exported to Italy and the Vatican way back in 1880. Can't imagine it's something other than A, says Petehead. Gino is saying, okay, A. So, the questions that tend to trip up everyone usually give a banana icon, but I think this is more of an asshat. Mike Molasses is saying radio in 1880. Absolutely, Marconi and his radio didn't come around until the 19-teens, the 1920s, right? Radio was much, much later. And Robert Falcon's expeditions to the Antarctic had been happening, I guess, but Robert Falcon Scott was in the early 20th century. He was certainly not going to the Antarctic in the 1880s. Glenmorangie was actually being exported to Italy and the Vatican away back then. It wasn't until the late 70s, 80s that Glenmorangie was marketed globally, but it had been exported in small quantities much, much earlier than that. So you can see a wee theme to tonight's session. Let's see who's on a 9 out of 9 before we go into the asshat at the end. How are you all doing? There's got to be some 9s. There's got to be some. Process elimination was required for that last one. Cesare is on a 9. Fantastic. Lachlan, 9. Jerry Miller, 9. But asshat time, absolutely. Jerry Nicholas, 9. Lots of 9s. Whiskey with Molly, 9. They're just so knowledgeable. Hellswood, 9. Simone, 9. Mike Molasses is celebrating his 8. Ben Demon Hunter on 8. Bruce Bernard, 8. Dave Smith, 8. Lassie's on a 7. P-Head is on a 9. So is Grainham Walt. Tobias on a 9. Daisy's still on a 9. Listen, fantastic. It jumps to the bottom. I'm going to guess the theme is obscure whiskey trivia. Let's see. Asshat at the end. On the official Glenmorangie website, how many official full bottles are available for you to buy? So if we talk about the amount of sheer variety that we have in the end of 2024 into 2025, I argue with you, it's too much. We have too much. All of the producers to a producer have released too much. Too much variety. How many full bottles are available to buy on the Glenmorangie website today? About the same number as A, Operational Island Scotch Malt Distilleries. About the same as B, Operational Islay Scotch Malt Distilleries. Or C, Operational Scotch Malt Distilleries beginning with the letter D. Horrible, horrible, horrible answers to a horrible question, but I'm simply asking you, and it's kind of on theme. Pretty tenuous, but it is kind of on theme. On the official Glenmorangie website, I'm reluctant to use the word core range, but they are official bottlings that you can buy. Some are out of stock, sure. 1, 2, 3 out of stock. But generally speaking, these are available to buy. Some people are going to enjoy celebrating a 10 out of 10 on a brutally tricky quiz, I have to say. But I can see some of you getting there tonight. A tale of asshat, says Greg. Spot on, buddy, spot on. Fernando's saying all the Scotland active, mothballed, closed and protected distilleries. D. No, actually active, open, operational Scotch malt distilleries beginning with D. There might be more of them than you imagine. Okay, let's just go with it. I can tell you that the numbers are A, operational island Scotch malt distilleries are number 25. Operational Islay Scotch malt distilleries, they are 10. And operational Scotch malt distilleries beginning with the letter D, 10 or 11, depending on whether you want to include Dallas Dew in that. I know it's getting revived, it's coming back to life. But yeah, the number is generally speaking 10. I can tell you that you can buy 25 different variants, between 20 and 25 different variants on the Glenmorangie website right now in January 2025. Some fantastic looking things there, don't get me wrong. Really, really a lot of choice. But sometimes I look at it and I just think, wow, and I know that a lot of people are really after keeping people in their brand and the thing. And I think when all the brands are doing that same thing, I think it just leads to so much confusion, but it is what it is. Still a surprising thing. 25 different Glenmos that you can pick up. So how did we get on? Anybody getting their 10 out of 10? Yes, there's celebrations coming in. Look at this. Fantastic. Cesari's on a 10. Jerry Miller's on a 10. Tap Saf says Whiskey with Molly once more. Not for the first time, eh, big guy? And Whiskey Hog almost there on a 9 out of 10 along with Alberto Road to Dram. Ginger Genius doing a great thing on 8 out of 10 as well. Lachlan managed a 10 out of 10. Celebrating. Fantastic. That's a lot, says Adrian H. It's absolutely a lot. Absolutely. 10 out of 10 for Daisy. Fantastic, Daisy. Congratulations. Hellswood on 10 out of 10. Nicholas on a 10 out of 10. Simone is celebrating a 10 out of 10. Whiskey with Molly celebrating again. Fantastic. Fernando. Graham Fraser is saying few got last minute educational guest 10 out of 10. Fantastic, Graham. We don't expect anything else. Second 10 out of 10 for Cesare. Hellswood is saying great start to the year. Quizwise 10 out of 10. Black Fen Conrad is saying 10 out of 10. Yippee. I think that's only the second or third time ever. Well, here's to that. More of that in 2025 for you as well, Black Fen. Grainham Alt James, my first 10, I can't even remember when, a year or more maybe. Well, let's hope 2025 is the year for you. Sorry I'm missing everybody. 10 out of 10 for Dave the Brave. Good to have you in, Dave the Brave. Fantastic. Congratulations on your 10 out of 10. What a way to start 2025 with so many of you managing 10 out of 10 on the quiz at the end. Right. No a bad start. I was a wee bit rusty tonight. I felt it. But I was up for it. I was looking forward to it. And I knew that I didn't want to do the same predictions that I've done in the past, me just throwing silly predictions. What I wanted to do was kind of just pragmatically, there's that word again, look at the year ahead from our perspective, consider where we are, consider where we think things are going, and also drop a few hints along the way of where we'd like things to go. Did we achieve that? I'm not sure. I think we did a not bad job. More than anything, for me, the big takeaway for me was the sheer optimism that we find ourselves in at the start of 2025. And that was not expected. I was surprised to see how open you guys are to having a good whiskey year in 2025. And of course, that's all about us as a community and what we're into, what we love and what we do. What we continue to do, what I'm looking forward to doing more of in 2025. And that is just loving this community, loving whiskey, and loving being able to connect like this as we do today. Until next Thursday, I'm going to raise this wee glass. This is the Overeem. I'm going to raise this wee glass of Tasmanian whiskey, and I'm going to remind you all that you're very dearly loved. Thank you all for hanging out with me tonight, and I look forward to hanging out with you next Thursday night. And until then, Slancha Barflies. Cheers.